This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien. Global's Make Some Noise Day on LBC.
Global's Make Some Noise is LBC's charity. Over the past 10 years, your donations have made a difference in communities across the UK. And this year, you can help Tiny Tickers, a small national charity working to improve the early detection, care and treatment of babies with congenital heart disease. Barney's parents, Emma and Perry, discovered that their baby had a serious heart defect at their 20-week scan, and they immediately turned to Tiny Tickers for support.
I had my son Barney in January 21. At our 20-week scan, we found out that he had congenital heart disease. From that point, we were kind of thrown into this world that we didn't know existed. And then we found Tiny Tickers and it was like, oh my goodness, what a relief. When Tiny Tickers said they were going to be doing this peer support, I signed us up for it. Suddenly, we didn't feel alone and just felt so supported.
And you can help Tiny Tickers now. To donate £40, £30 or £20, just text LBC40, LBC30 or LBC20, no spaces, to 70766. 100% of your donation will go to Global's Make Some Noise. 16 and over only, please, and do seek the bill payer's permission. Standard network charges may apply, or you can donate whatever you can afford online, and every little counts. Do see the terms and conditions at makesomenoise.com.
Global's Make Some Noise Day on LBC.
And a very good morning to you. It is 5 minutes after 10, and we will, of course, be returning to Make Some Noise Day throughout the day today. I think you know me well enough by now to know that if I throw my full weight behind something, then I jolly well mean it. I think you can tell, even if I'm trying to sound enthusiastic about something I'm not enthusiastic about. I think you can probably tell by now, because we've been spending our mornings together for so long. This is one of the most important days of our year, and we support the kind of charities that get neither the attention nor the funding that they should. And I park my politics on days like today, because yes, a lot of what we help support through Make Some Noise should be provided by government, should be provided by the Treasury, but it isn't. Which means we've got to step up to the plate. And I'll be introducing you to some of the beneficiaries of Make Some Noise and urging you to donate whatever you can afford, with my personal guarantee that it all goes to Global's Make Some Noise. 6 minutes after 10 is the time. Do you know, I like this phrase, do you know what salting the earth means? Do you know what salting the earth means? Salting the earth is a wonderful phrase. Is it an idiom? I suppose it is an idiom, actually, because literally it means that a victorious army, when retreating from vanquished foes, having won, would salt the earth so that defeated enemies could not grow crops. It would render land infertile. The lands of the defeated enemy would be rendered infertile and suitable for farming. So it's a bit like a prehistoric economic sanction, isn't it? You're robbing them of the ability to grow crops. I think it's the correct phrase in some ways to describe what Rishi Sunak is doing with HS2, because it has been announced that they will start selling off at the first opportunity. A lot of the infrastructure and land that has been bought and vacated for the HS2 extension between Birmingham and Manchester. I mean, including, and I don't know whether you want to talk to me about this, but including people, are we looking at the possibility of people who've had their homes, this is just a complete aside, but you've had your home compulsory purchased and you might now be able to buy it back for less than what you paid for it? Because compulsory purchase is usually quite an inflated price. You usually get quite a good deal on it because you don't want to move, you don't want to sell your house. And now you're buying it back at a, there's a low in them. I don't know. That's just me being a little bit curious. I'm always intrigued by unexpected bonuses. But I think he's salting the earth. I think that because contracts are being cancelled and infrastructure is being removed and stuff is being sold off, I I'm not sure that it doesn't deserve to be described as salting the earth. What it does is prevent Keir Starmer from saying, we'll rebuild it, we'll reopen it, we will revisit it, because what he will revisit will be measurably and notably different from what the situation is now. But he's gone a little further than that. He has decided to abandon Labour's 2019 manifesto pledge to complete HS2, which some people think puts him on a bit of a collision course with MPs and activists. And it adds to this sense that the opposition isn't really opposing anything. Now, if you take the salting the earth metaphor and run with it, then you could make a compelling case for saying that Keir Starmer has little choice but to announce what he announced yesterday. And this is exactly what he announced yesterday. He said, now, can I stand here and commit to reversing the decision on HS2? No, I can't. They've just taken a wrecking ball to this project. They've blown a massive hole through it and are about to start cancelling the contracts, releasing the land, reconfiguring Euston. I can't stand here after they've made such a big hole in their plans and say I will simply reverse it. What I can say is do Northern Powerhouse Rail. Yes, we'll get on with it. And that, of course, involves a high-speed link between Liverpool and Leeds and an upgraded line from Manchester to Hull via Sheffield. And I want to know what you think. I don't want to confine the conversation exclusively to this particular element of policy and context. I've said to you for some time that the challenge Keir Starmer faces is akin to carrying a Ming vase across an ice rink, okay? Let's not underestimate that. The massed ranks of the Tory media and, of course, the salting of the earth undertaken by Tory media and Tory politicians, where they kind of pretend or seek to portray Labour governments that have been largely successful as somehow having been failures. A number of people that think that the Tories currently have the right to accuse any Labour government in history of economic mismanagement is frankly astonishing. But the odds are always stacked against a Labour leader in this country. It was, in the case of Ed Miliband, for example, the Daily Mail thought nothing of maligning his dead war hero father. I'll say that again because you may have forgotten or missed it at the time. They described Ralph Miliband, who came here as a refugee and fought for his adopted country in the Second World War, was described by a writer called Geoffrey Levy under the editorship of Paul Dacre and the ownership of Viscount Rothermere, or Jonathan Harmsworth to his mates. In the Daily Mail, he was described as the man who hated Britain. That is what Labour leaders are up against. Some Labour leaders, unfortunately, give enormous amounts of ammunition to right-wing media, but some don't, and they will invent appalling slurs up to and including your dead father. So that's what you're up against, and Keir Starmer seems to understand this implicitly. Keir Starmer seems to, forgive the phrase, but he seems to bend over backwards to avoid offering up any form of ammunition to the kind of commentary that I've just described. And I think that's the right thing to do. But there is a day, or there comes a point where I think with probably a year, very likely to be much more than a year, between now and a general election, you begin to wonder what the opposition is actually opposing. And that will be a broader element of our first conversation today. But what I want to go in on first, because it's one of those issues that I've been unable to measure the passion attached to HS2. I can normally you could almost pay me to tell you where public opinion is or where the depth of feeling is. I've become very adept over the years at working out where an issue actually might be all over the media, but the people don't really care about it. I watch the switchboard when other presenters are on, and the level of interest in an issue like transgender toilets, for example, bears no resemblance whatsoever to the amount of attention paid to it by elements of the right-wing media. You might bang on about it for 20 minutes straight, but the phones don't ring. And if they do, it's the same relatively small number of people making the same relatively shrill points all the time. So I get an immigration, you're looking at a very different constituency of people who are very easily riled up, and a massively underestimated number of people who are sick to death of all the meaningless rhetoric and want to recognise, as Zoe Gardner has explained this week, that what makes people try and cross the channel in flimsy dinghies is not the existence of flimsy dinghies or people smugglers, but it's hope. It's hope that drives that sort of desperate migration. But more and more people understanding that. So I've got quite a good, if I forgive me the phrase, I've got quite a good licked finger. You know when you lick your finger and you stick it in the air and you can work out which way the wind is blowing? I've got quite a good, my finger over the years has got better, but largely, well, entirely thanks to you. Entirely thanks to you. So we are less surprised, perhaps, than other corners of the country, certainly other corners of the media, when things happen. I have not been able to tap into how passionate people are about HS2. I just haven't. I find the conversations we've had really interesting. And obviously the invitation to attack whichever political party you want to attack for reasons that you're not that capable of going into much depth about, that's always in place on issues like this. They've cancelled HS2. What do you think about that? Who's cancelled it? The Tories. It's awful. No, it's great. Sorry, who's cancelled it? So your reaction to the news of the cancellation is driven not by our understanding of what it entails, but by our loyalty or enmity towards the people doing the cancelling. Sarah makes an excellent point on this, because I think the propaganda has been very, very powerful. I have to admit, she tells me, I fell for the whole who needs to get to Birmingham 10 minutes quicker business. And then my husband educated me, having worked on transport policy. I suspect I won't be the only one who will only realise what's been lost after the event. So the capacity that you free up on the other lines by opening HS2 improves everything. It improves local connections. It improves freight transport. It improves connectivity. That was the point that somehow deliberately has been overlooked. And that leads you to Keir Starmer's... Listen, this might be quite a boring phone-in, because Keir Starmer is quite a boring politician. But in 2023, having looked at what happens when we have exciting politicians like Boris Johnson, or radical politicians like Liz Truss, or... Well, Rishi Sunak's quite boring as well, but with a fat side order of levels of dishonesty that I don't think even his harshest critics expected to be seeing so quickly after assuming the reins of power. It might be quite a boring phone-in, because we might just broadly agree that, yeah, Keir Starmer's actually still successfully carrying a Ming vase across an ice rink. So the government has announced that, or is intending to sell off the land that has been bought for the provision of HS2, to cancel the contracts that are in place for the provision of HS2, to drive a coach and horses, or take a wrecking ball, if you like, to the whole project, reconfiguring Euston. And therefore, Keir Starmer says, well, I can't then, can I? I can't. So imagine if the plan had been to move into a house, right? And Rishi Sunak announces we're no longer moving into that house. And both parties in their 2019 manifesto had a manifesto pledge that we would all move into that house over there, right? Imagine a house. There's a house. That house is called HS2 Towers. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer both pledged to, although Sunak wasn't leader in 2019, we're going to move into that house if I am in power. Rishi Sunak abandons that manifesto and says we're not moving into that house anymore, and then he knocks it down. All right? This is my defence of Keir Starmer now, but I've got a side order this morning of should he be doing more opposition. Labour grandees are coming out to suggest that there needs to be a more digestible offering, a bigger package. So everybody likes a bigger package. So you get to this point where Keir Starmer today is being asked, are you going to move into that house like you said you would? And his defence is, well, I can't because they've knocked it down. So the specifics of this particular incident, 03456060973, and then I really want you to get involved in this, actually. I want you to tell me, and I'd love to get this a bit footballification free if we can. How is Starmer doing, in your view? How is Keir Starmer doing, in your view? Because did you notice what happened in the course of this introduction? I started from a sincere point of scepticism, saying, what the hell does the opposition actually oppose? And then the more I thought about it, and you allow me, thankfully, to do some of my thinking out loud in the morning, the more I thought about it, the more I began to wonder whether actually he had no choice whatsoever but to say what he said. And that leads you to the analogy of the house. How can Keir Starmer pledge to move into a house that he promised to move into 4 years ago if Rishi Sunak has essentially knocked the house down? I'll just leave you with one further thought on this, because there is, I think, a third way, and that is a suggestion by Ian Dunt, who I find myself mentioning on the programme quite a lot, which I hope is a mark of the calibre of his commentary. But he suggests that what Starmer could have done is say they're still looking at it, but we are minded to continue. And that would then help prevent the sale of the land he's referring to, because are you going to buy something that, well, is surrounded by uncertainty? Are you going to buy in on stuff that is still surrounded by uncertainty? Let's say they've got a year left. How much damage could that wrecking ball do in a year if the person who's going to inherit the problem says, well, we're not sure, we're still quite interested in carrying on with it? So they announce that we're all moving into a house. Rishi Sunak announces that he's knocking the house down. Keir Starmer says we're still going to move into it, or we're certainly not ruling out moving into it. And the question then becomes, how much of the house can Rishi Sunak knock down before Keir Starmer potentially becomes Prime Minister? So there it is. Specific question about this decision, broader question about the Ming vase being carried across the ice rink, and a fascinating question, because this is what I mean about the licking the finger and sticking it in the air. I couldn't say at the moment where the sort of swing voter, the potential swing voter stood about Keir Starmer's performance, his political performance. I've got a sneaking suspicion he's doing a lot better than the commentators acknowledge, and you could argue that opinion polls and events in Scotland yesterday would support that point. 20 minutes after 10 is the time, a rather longer introduction than I was expecting, but, you know, plus ça change. And the number you need, as ever, remains 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
23 minutes after 10, so there it is. What's going on? The Keir Starmer policy of clinging tightly to a Ming vase as he navigates an ice rink. Is it working for you? And on the specific question of HS2, if Rishi Sunak is cancelling the contracts, releasing the land, reconfiguring Euston, taking a wrecking ball, you could argue, to the whole project, does Keir Starmer have any choice but to say, well, I can't commit to reversing the ban? I don't know. I'd love to know what you think. Thor is in Waltham Forest. Thor, what would you like to say?
First of all, I'm a swing voter. Okay. In fact, I've been a swing activist.
How can you be a swing activist?
I will explain. I was a young Conservative,
yes,
and then got very bored after the John Major years. You remember when it collapsed into chaos?
Yes, of course I do, yes.
Family values. So then I joined. I thought Blair was pretty great, so I joined to support him, and I worked in
I misunderstood you, Thor. So you're an activist. So your activism swings. I thought you were an activist for swinging.
That would be very much more amusing.
Pampas grass, I gather, or at least in the 1970s, was a key indicator. But no, so you commit so much.
I was out of politics.
I was
out of politics,
yes,
and then came back, and I'm Jewish, and I found Corbyn so terrifying.
Yep.
I had to join the Conservative Party just to oppose him, and actually I became chairman of my local Conservative Association.
Blimey.
And then I did, which was Leighton and Wanstead, and then I actually just left just before the 2019 election.
Why?
I thought my job was done. Corbyn was finished.
Fair enough. How much credit are you taking personally for that, Thor?
And I was so impressed, though, in opposition to Wes Streeting. I was one of the leaders of the campaign to get rid of him, and he was sort of like, yeah, this guy's really good, and maybe I'm on the wrong side here. Anyway.
Gosh.
So I will swing.
Clearly.
I will go backwards and forwards before you get interested, callers.
Yes.
And I think Starmer is a sensible pair of hands that we need right now. And he's got to make difficult decisions.
Yes.
And for people, I think, who are perhaps more traditional Labour supporters, who are impressed with a pie in the sky, we will do everything. He realises that can't be done, and I think HSBC, that's a bank, HS2 is just too much money to spend, and he knows that, and he has more important things to do, like schools and hospitals.
Well, he is. Well, yes. Let me just quibble slightly, and I'm not being the devil's advocate on this one. I mean this because it was a 2019 manifesto commitment. Now the facts have changed, as Rishi Sunak alluded to in his speech, and the money is much higher, partly because of mismanagement, partly because of inflation, and partly because of
cost of land.
Yeah, all of that plays a part in the cost. Yep. But that's not Starmer's objection as it stands. His objection as it stands is that what he will inherit will be a completely different proposition to the situation he would be in if he were in power today. So that's not his reason for rejecting it. And I wonder what you make of the suggestion, Thor, that he could simply say, we are minded to continue, but we can't obviously commit to it. And then it sort of just puts the brakes on Sunak's attempts to salt the earth.
Having been a Conservative activist, and I know both players play it, the dirty tricks brigade mean that everything anybody says on either side will be used against them, whether it's true or not.
Yes, that's true, or not.
Both sides play this game.
Yes.
If a politician says something, the words will be changed. And I see this, but we did it, they do it. It's part of the game.
So what you're suggesting is
anything.
Yeah, so that ploy is too subtle for the game that politics plays these days, to think, I'm going to do this and I'm playing chess here. I'm playing 3D chess. I'm going to say that we are not ruling it out, but at the same time I'm going to say we can't rule it in, and that means that therefore Sunak will play his pawns and I will take his queen and and he's thinking 8 moves ahead. That would be silly.
Exactly what he's doing.
That would be silly in a game where you've just got to get the next move right, and the next move is don't give them anything they can attack you with on.
He's got to win the next election.
Okay, I like that, and you're fully on board. Where do you think you're going to swing next, Thor?
I have no idea. I think he'll be okay for two elections probably, and then who knows? It could all fall apart. I mean, this is what happens with governments. They get voted in, and then they run out of steam.
I just, on a psychological level, if you'd allow me, I'm fascinated because I understand swinging. But I don't understand quite going in so hard on the opposite position to the one you were in pre-swing. It's an interesting character trait, I think, of yours.
I'm a centrist, and I want to keep traditionally, Britain always wanted to keep neutrality in Europe by backing whoever was fighting against the big people.
Yes.
I want to keep things in the sensible centre.
So as we walk across a tightrope, you do not favour one arm over the other when trying to keep your balance.
I am an anti-footballification.
You are, aren't you? It's a pleasure to hear that position articulated so clearly. And how foolish would it be to favour one? So when you're walking over a tightrope and you've got both your arms out to keep your balance, are you a right armist or a left armist? Well, Thor is an example to us all. He will adjust his arms according to what's best to stay on. I'm actually miming this for some reason. I don't know why. Hello to everyone watching on YouTube. Yeah, Thor is walking, and that's literally the only way you can ever get across a tightrope. That's an even better, perhaps, breakdown of what we call footballification than the one that I used in the book where I invented the word. Thank you, Thor. That's fascinating. And, of course, it speaks directly to both the big picture and the little picture. The little picture of HS2, I think gets clearer. I'm not sure he had much choice. Articulating the absence of choice then becomes the political challenge. You say he's done the thing he had to do because he had no choice, then there's no politics involved at all. But, of course, articulating the reasons for doing the thing is where it kicks in. And that hasn't worked completely. For example, Paul in Kent says the house analogy doesn't work because even if it's knocked down, Starmer could use the land and build a tower block to house 50 housing association residents in if he wanted to. I don't think you play for the emotion on this. You can't compare HS2 to looking after the poor in quite that way, but there's the money. You see, so he is saying, I can't commit to it because I don't know what it would involve and what it would cost and what the consequences will be of Rishi Sunak salting the earth. And at the moment, and we're only halfway through the hour, that works for me. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
33 minutes after 10 is the time. I'll tell you something, that's quite interesting with regard to using this job, as you can do as well, to get an idea of which way the wind is blowing. Earlier, it was Thor a moment ago mentioned John Major and the end of that regime, that administration. I don't know if you remember, but it fell to pieces in sort of 95 and 96. And the word that I think, if you did one of those, I like those word clouds, I think the word that would have come up most at the time was probably sleaze. He just sort of found himself surrounded by people who kept getting caught in compromising situations, both, politically, ethically, commercially, and morally. Now, morally doesn't really matter anymore. I think it would have happened anyway. The cult of Boris Johnson just pressed turbo boost on that. So you're not going to get into any trouble anymore if you're morally delinquent as a Conservative MP, as long as everything is consensual, obviously. But cheating on your wife, impregnating mistresses, lying about it to your boss doesn't stop you getting into Downing Street anymore in Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain. We may see a swinging back of that moral pendulum. I don't know. I kind of hope so, because I think it matters. If you can't trust someone to be honest with their family, how can you trust them to be honest with the country? But that's just me being a bit prurient and Victorian, perhaps. So it's not going to be that. But I am struck by the number of people getting in touch with me now to talk about the sleaze that they associate with this government, which is odd because it obviously doesn't get the coverage that you might expect. But the PPE scandals, Rishi Sunak's decision not to investigate possible millions, if not more, of pounds worth of fraud, the cronyism that appears to be in place in the dishing out of contracts, senior Tory donors and members appearing to benefit from incredibly lucrative contracts that weren't put out to tender. I think that stink has hung around a lot more than the Westminster bubble allows. I could be wrong, but we probably get a slightly better bead on stuff beyond Westminster than everybody stuck in Westminster gets, partly because we don't really have politicians on the programme much, certainly not on a daily, weekly basis. But I think the stench of that perceived corruption, because a number of people getting in touch with me already today to talk about how they think that so-and-so is going to benefit from this, or he's only done it to help so-and-so. The idea that Rishi Sunak represents a brand of conservatism that's dedicated to servicing donors and plutocrats has for many been proved by his role in COVID. I don't know how widespread that is, but I thought I'd alert you to the first fairly strong whiff of it that I'm getting in the studio. 10:36 is the time. Pauline is in Motherwell. Pauline, what made you pick up the phone?
Morning, James, and
Hello.
That was a beautiful introduction into why I picked up the phone. So
wow.
I want to answer the question about how's Keir Starmer doing, and
Yes.
I said to your researcher, slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the pandemic. I was one of the 3.8 million people that were excluded, didn't get any financial support, and you and Sheila were brilliant.
Well, we tried. I don't think we didn't make much difference in the great scheme of things, but at least you had a voice.
Yep, absolutely. So during that time, Keir did I watched an awful lot of politics, which I wasn't really into before.
Okay.
I will say that I did vote Conservative last time.
Yeah.
And then when I got left behind, I was absolutely stunned, right? Really stunned, because I watched, as Rishi said, we're going to put our arms around people, etc. And he just left us the size of Wales' population. But anyway.
Were you scunnered?
I was scunnered.
Well, you can. Thank you. I thought you might have been scunnered. There's a word I've been trying to get onto the programme for ages.
And then, so Keir was doing this. Now, Labour at the time were just nothing in Scotland, and Keir did this, let me speak to people. And because I was a volunteer in the excluded, Facebook
Yes.
group, so I signed up, and then put a question forward, and there was only going to be 6 questions, and my question was number 2.
Okay.
And I nearly spat my tea out, right? Because I thought, I've not got a hope of this question getting asked. And he listens, right? And this is why I think slow and steady wins the race. He listened, and he said, right, Pauline, I'm going to, on the way home, I'm going to phone Annalise Dobbs, who was the Shadow Treasurer at the time. He said, I'm going to speak to Annalise about what it is that you're raising. And then, James, at the Prime Minister's question time the following Wednesday, he asked the question about excluded.
Fair enough. I mean, that's a connection to politics that, I mean, to be honest, a lot of people who've been following stuff, Thor's going to be furious. He's been swinging around for 20 years following all the major parties, and you managed to get a question on PMQs just a few days after becoming politically engaged. That's incredible. So, but he just struck you as someone straight, I think.
That's it. Yes, he's boring, but he really listens. He really listened, and that's what he was doing. He was the this was for like Glasgow, I think that this call was for, but he wanted to find out, and he actually said, I know that we've got so much work to do in Scotland, and it probably will take us years and years. And then you've got this by-election last night, right, which was more that the SNP threw that away because of just
the circumstances of the by-election. Yeah, I think they're possibly slightly over-egging this result on that. I mean, there's a lot of specific circumstances to it, but it's still, the direction of traffic is positive. So what you've done then is explain a position in which you give him the benefit of the doubt, and when he comes out and says HS2, the reasons why he will not today commit to doing it, then you think, well, he's probably, I'm going to trust him. He's done the work. He's done the sums. He's the opposite of Boris Johnson in that sense. Boris Johnson had come out, not only am I going to build HS2, I'm going to build HS3, HS4 and HS207, folks. And then all the idiots cheer, and he ends up Prime Minister.
Yeah. And the question that I have about HS2 is, why didn't they pull the plug sooner?
Well,
Sometimes we need to say no.
You
right?
do, and that I can defend them on that. I can defend them on that. And that is, well, I suppose Sunak could have pulled it slightly sooner, but he hasn't been there for very long. And Johnson was, as we've just established, a great one for doing laps of honour on empty tanks, if you like, on fumes. Pauline, thank you. That's a lovely call and a really lovely story, actually. It is 10:41. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We'll find a way into that broader issue of whether or not can you do word clouds on the radio? You can't quite, can you? But you know what they do. They say a name to you and you say a word back, and then they make a cloud out of what words are said most often. And with Sunak, it's rich. Actually, rich comes up a lot. But I am interested in whether or not that sort of whiff of dodginess is persisting a lot more than many realise with the PPE and the contracts and the rest of it. Vicky's in Liverpool. Vicky, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
I was listening to your introduction, like the previous caller, and it just kind of made me think about how I've felt about the Labour Party over the last few years with Keir Starmer in charge. Obviously, in Liverpool, Jeremy Corbyn's are, for the vast majority of us, are unofficial, unelected king of the city.
Sure.
But so with Starmer, it was kind of like from the beginning, it was like, why isn't he fighting more? Why isn't he opposing more? Why isn't he, more militant and about some of the issues and some of the things that the Conservative Party are doing and saying are just awful.
Yeah.
So, but as it's gone on, and then particularly this past few weeks, and then culminating in the Tory Party conference, you notice that the more he ignores or is passive or is like, okay, well, let's see how this goes, and doesn't really get involved in the fight, the stronger and more awful the Conservatives seem to become. And I don't know whether that is on purpose or whether I'm just noticing it more, but it kind of seems like the more he sits back, the more they hang themselves.
Well, it is I think it was probably the Romans who said, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. And that's on a grand scale. But what about the question of whether the opposition should be doing more opposing? I think you're saying, why? I mean, what's the point? They're smacking themselves around the face with a wet fish every morning. What's the point of insisting on more?
I I was initially like that, and I was in the very early tenure of Keir Starmer. I was like, who is this David Cameron clone guy that is the leader of the Labour Party? But I can only equate it to a bully who's taunting and not getting the reaction that they want.
That's a really interesting point. But some of that comes from the left, you know. Some of that bullying is coming from the constituency you alluded to at the beginning of the call. But I think they're a lot noisier than they are sizable. But so you're in the vase, really, aren't you? You're in the Ming vase, being carried carefully across an ice rink.
That's a nice analogy.
It's true, though, isn't it? That's what just occurred to me while you were talking. Because he's managed to. My analogies are going nuts today, Vicky. But in for a penny, in for a pound.
Good analogy.
So it's like a video game, isn't it? But so there's a Ming vase and an ice rink and Keir Starmer, but there's also a video game because his job isn't just to get from one side of the ice rink to the other, it's to catch falling voters in the vase at the Seswell.
Absolutely. And I would always vote Labour anyway.
Right.
And one of the things that was really annoying me about Starmer was that I've got to vote Labour. I've got to vote with him as the leader, and that was sticking in my craw for a while, but
that's nice. That's how I felt in 2019, but it stuck in my craw right
I understand. I understand because we're probably kind of on a Venn diagram of political ideology, but
you're going to put that cross in that box.
That we meet.
Yes, exactly that, and that's a beautiful explanation actually of why you've moved. This is why actually, Vicky, if you'd allow me to pay you a quick compliment, that's why the political phone-ins that we have are always best when we manage, and it's not easy. We manage somehow to zone in on people who change their mind, whether it's as violently as Thor or as incrementally as you know. So you say you're always going to vote Labour, which I completely understand, particularly in Liverpool. But you can explain why there's movement within that loyalty. And Thor, of course, at the top explained perfectly what it's like to be an absolutely radical centrist, completely committed to keeping things as calm, as strong and stable as you can. That's lovely. 10:45 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It is, of course, Make Some Noise Day, so the schedule is a little different from usual. And at the moment, I can't guarantee this will be sustained. My enthusiasm levels for continuing this conversation are quite high, because I think, thanks to the callers largely, we've got it right today. And the landscape we're examining together is proving very, very interesting. So if you do want to join the queue, if you do want to get stuck into the question of A, Starmer has got it right on HS2, and B, how's he doing generally, then the number you need is 0345 6060973. John in Hartlepool asks, James, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? Because I mentioned salting the earth, which I think is a Roman thing, and I also mentioned don't interrupt your enemy if they're making a mistake, which was, I don't know, probably Cicero or Marcus Aurelius or someone like that. I don't understand this thing. It's kicked off. My girls were telling me about it. So girls asking their boyfriends, young women asking their boyfriends, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? I love stuff like that, it's like zeitgeisty stuff, but I don't think I can get a topic out of it. Can I? Can I?
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10 minutes to 11, and it is also, of course, Make Some Noise Day, our annual attempt to reach the parts that other fundraising efforts generally fail to reach, largely, as you'll learn or have already discovered, because we focus on charities that don't get the kind of attention that big household name operations do. It is Global's Make Some Noise, and it is LBC's charity. Today is Make Some Noise Day, and we are raising money for those small projects, helping those living through the toughest of circumstances. And now that could include people living with serious mental health issues. It could include tackling domestic abuse or helping people with physical disabilities, helping with homelessness or even loneliness. I'm joined in the studio now by Anna Glover and Stephen Mann from Youth Concern, which is just one of the small charities we will be helping this year. They're based in Aylesbury, and they work with vulnerable young people aged 13 to 25. Counselling, a drop-in centre and homelessness prevention are fairly high up on their list of priorities. And I'll start with you, Anna, if I may. You're a trustee overseeing the running of Youth Concern for the last 5 years. It's not your day job, is it?
Not, no.
It's in addition to being a top corporate communications professional. So what drew you to this? Why?
Well, I live near Aylesbury, so it's a local charity, and I just wanted to be able to do something to support young people. It's obviously they have huge challenges, and it just felt like a good thing to do.
How did you become aware of the sort of scale of the need? What are the sort of, how do you know if you're living in an area? I presume everybody is, where this sort of
I mean, there's some stats around Aylesbury. It's apparently the homelessness in Aylesbury, young homelessness in Aylesbury is 22% higher than the national average.
Really? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, you'd think Buckinghamshire is a lovely sort of...
I was already falling into that trap, actually.
Yeah.
But, there's part of the answer to the question as well. And have you noticed in the 5 years you've been doing it, things getting worse, better, or staying the same?
Worse. So we've had COVID, and then obviously the cost of living crisis. And, generally we're getting a lot more young people coming to us with need for our services.
Stephen Mann, you're Director of Youth Services at Youth Concern. It strikes me that the prevalence of young people needing help is quite new. I mean, we've always been aware of it, but people are falling through the safety net earlier than ever before, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's the lack of support that they may get in their lives at home or in schools or anywhere else. That's why Youth Concern and charities like us do a great job in terms of supporting those young people in need at specific times.
Why did you get involved?
So for me, getting involved is, I grew up in Glasgow, accents come from there, and a lot of gang violence stuff that happened, especially growing up. I think I joined part of a gang when I was 9 or 10 years old, I think it was.
Blimey.
So it's just, you don't think it's a gang, you just think it's some friends and you get together, but there's so much gang violence that happens, you get dragged into a lot of stuff that you shouldn't see. So I see my friend getting stabbed at 11 years old.
Really?
You see people getting shot at 12. There's what you experience at a young age, it kind of shapes what you do and how you get there in terms of life, and that's why I get into youth work. Is I've seen a lot of people go through a lot of challenges, and that's why I do the work that I do in terms of the youth work and make the best impact, and my values align very well with Youth Concern, and that's why I made the jump last month to go join as a director.
Fantastic. Give me an idea of what happens when someone walks through the door, because what you've just described is a world in which a kind of bogus machismo is very highly prized, and you're talking about lads in particular in the example you've given of your own lived experience who aren't going to want to admit to being in any form of need or in any way vulnerable. So how do you reach a
I think it's all about engagement. It's about relationships. If you don't have the relationships, you don't have anything. So it's about how you have that relationship with the community and relationship with the young people. It takes a bit of time. They may come in, have a quick game of pool, and then they may disappear for a week, and they may come back. It's about how you entice them to come back and have that support, because it's not we'll come and help you. It's not a case of that. It's about having that time and opportunity to build that relationship up. Maybe a course of about a month or 2 months. Then they start to open up and trust you, and you'll hear from one of the young people just that exact experience coming up is that they need that relationship to then open up and share. Then we have the resources to support. So it takes a little bit of time to get to that point.
Can you give us a specific example? Can you tell the tale of someone who you've kind of steered or helped steer from a bad place to a good place?
Yeah, just for a young person that I've worked with as well, was that the mum passed away, loads of experiences at home that they found very hard, and they had nowhere to turn to, no support, no issues at all. But they came to the youth centre in terms of that support, and that's when we were able to support them in terms of helping them with the housing, helping with the individual financial costing, managed to get them a passport, get them housed. There's loads of different stuff that we can get supported with, and I think that's the young people come to see us for that specific support and need, because they know they can trust us. We're a safe place and a safe haven for young people. I
hear that phrase, Anna, the idea that there's nowhere else they can turn to. It's pretty bleak. How do you help? Because it's a glib phrase, isn't it? We help prevent homelessness. But sometimes it's just about teaching people stuff that's out there that they weren't aware of.
Yeah, a lot of the support we give is emotional support, but it's sort of how independent living support. So how, and for example, how would you navigate filling the bureaucracy of having to fill in forms for housing benefit, for example, things like that. But we also have something called the Next Step Project, which is a house in Aylesbury, which has 9 private bedrooms, and then it has a kitchen, a living area, and we so people can apply. They have to be 18 and over. People can apply for supported accommodation, and they can live there for up to 18 months. So that really gives them the opportunity, to find a job, to get their life in order, and it's amazing.
And it's little stuff sometimes, like being able to iron a shirt, isn't it? Or just being able to, wear some shoes that haven't got holes in the bottom of them or stuff. I also remember when I first started exploring these sort of areas. You mentioned the kitchen there in the house. I spoke to some lads in care who were being housed in somewhere that had no cooking facilities, and so everyone wondered why they were not only living on chips but also hanging outside the chip shop where they're getting involved in less healthy influences, as Stephen alluded to. So just simply having a hub, a home, a base.
We've launched last year. We launched a food bank, so the first youth food bank in Aylesbury, and we've, I think, given over several hundred food packages.
229 food parcels so far. So it's quite a lot of food parcels out to the young people. We've actually, in terms of food, we've provided 2,500 meals to the young people accessing our drop-in centre as well. So a good holistic support that Youth Concern provide of the homelessness support from the next step to the youth centre, as well as the counselling service.
It's incredible, isn't it, that is necessary? But my goodness me, it really is. What sort of difference? There's people listening to this now who are constantly bombarded with requests for their charity, with requests for their kindness. Give them an idea, if you can, of the kind of difference that their donation to Global's Make Some Noise will make to Youth Concern in Aylesbury.
It's going to be a huge difference, no matter how small that is. The impact that the money that you raise goes to really good charities that can make a great difference, especially Youth Concern. We deliver such great projects of counselling, the Next Step project and homeless support, the proper holistic support of young people that they need. This can go towards that, and it'll be a great opportunity.
Good. Give me an idea finally, Anna, of someone in Aylesbury, a young person in an Aylesbury where Youth Concern doesn't exist. What happens to them?
Goodness, I guess they're just out on the street and just hanging around and get into trouble, like, Stephen was saying, happened when he was sort of 9 or 10 years old. This is a safe space. It's also nice and warm in the winter, because we're heating it, so people can come and get a warm, safe space to be. They can get free food. If you haven't got that, then who knows where your life could lead. You get
Anna Glover,
harsh.
It is harsh. Stephen Mann, thank you very much for your time today and of course for the work that you do. As I just mentioned, I do know that times are tough for everyone right now, or certainly tougher than usual. But when you hear from people like Anna and Stephen, you realise that just a few pounds, the price of a coffee or the price of tonight's takeaway, can make a really big difference. So I am asking you, if you can, to donate right now. Whatever you can afford really will make an incredible difference. The best bit for me about Make Some Noise is actually delivering the cheques. This bit isn't in the script. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this at this point, but the best bit is delivering the cheques and seeing the difference that they make to people who, in many cases, are giving up time and energy or doing things from a place of goodness and often feel neglected and abandoned even as they fight the good fight. So to turn up in these places and hand over the money it's an incredible privilege, and you will be joining listeners right across the country who are making a big difference this very second. So just to give you an idea, a £40 donation could pay for a one-on-one counselling session at Youth Concern for a young person experiencing mental health difficulties. And you have heard on this programme how hard it is to access that sort of support and how crucial it can be in bringing people back from dark places. £20 could enable Youth Concern to buy personal hygiene and sanitary products for a vulnerable young person. We live in a country where some people profess scepticism at the levels of poverty that are now endemic. 1 million young people in the UK who don't have a bed of their own. They either share it with a sibling or a parent or sleep on the floor. So the idea of not being able to afford deodorant or shampoo or sanitary products shouldn't even be controversial. It's a sad fact, and £20 could enable Youth Concern to sort out people on that front. £10 could pay for essential clothing items for a homeless young person supported by Youth Concern, and £5 even could contribute to the food that Stephen's just described as making its way from Youth Concern's Youth Food Bank into the hands of hungry young people. So to donate £40, £30 or £20, text LBC 40, LBC 30 or LBC 20, no spaces, to 70766. You can give what you want online at lbc.co.uk. That's LBC 40, LBC 30 or LBC 20 to 707 66. 100% of your donation will go to Global's Make Some Noise. 16 and over only. Please seek your bill payer's permission, and standard network charges may apply. As I said, you can also donate whatever you want, whatever you can afford. So you could donate 40 grand or £4 by going to makesomenoise.com. You'll also find all the terms and conditions there. Thank you from Anna, from Stephen, from everyone at Youth Concern, and from all of us here at LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
5 minutes after 11, a lovely message here from Stuart, who's in Islington. He said, my daughter had a heart defect and Tiny Tickers helped. They provided us with information, support when our family was at a really low point. It's an amazing charity, so thank you so much for supporting them. She's had 2 operations at the Boston Children's Hospital in the States. Thank you to everyone at LBC. Stuart, it's Make Some Noise Day, so it's lovely to hear. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. Back to the politics, back to the... I like this, actually. I think we've got the question right somehow, even though it's not a particularly clear one as usual. But I don't think... Tell me what choice he had on HS2. You cannot say, we will crack on with it, while Rishi Sunak is literally knocking it down. Releasing the land that has been bought to build the Manchester to Birmingham link, and cancelling the contracts that are in place to build the Manchester to Birmingham link, and at least a year on the clock probably before anybody else gets into Downing Street. No guarantee, of course, that he will, but at least a year on the clock almost certainly until he gets there. I mean, how stupid would it be to say, yes, we'll definitely carry on, whatever the cost and whatever the difficulty. I don't know. That's why I'm saying challenge me. So I don't know if you've seen a film that Peter Oborne made, I'm a great admirer of Peter's. We don't agree about everything, but he's been on a journey politically, and he has probably the most tireless chronicler of Boris Johnson's lies, which when I talk about a journey, you'll understand. I think he was political editor at The Spectator when Boris Johnson was editor. So for someone like that to be the most tireless chronicler in the country of Boris Johnson's lies is significant, isn't it? But he's also done a digest of what he sees as Keir Starmer's lies. And where I disagree on that is the difference between lying in power and changing your mind in opposition. But I appreciate this might sound a bit woolly, which is why I'm inviting you to ring in and tear it to shreds like a mountain lion. Because you say in 2019 you will do this, and then things happen, whether it's something as simple as inflation or as complicated as the cancellation of HS2, whether it's a shift in our economic circumstances. I don't get the vitriol that then greets the announcement that you won't be able to decide what to do until you know what the landscape looks like when you get into power. I don't quite get that, unless it is just footballification. And with Keir Starmer, sometimes more of the vitriol comes from the left of him than it does from the actual party he seeks to depose from Downing Street. I don't know, but feel free to explore that avenue as well. 8 minutes after 11 is the time. It was Napoleon, I think, or rather, that's a bit cocky of me. It was Napoleon, you tell me, not the Romans who first said that thing about never interrupting your enemy whenever you make a mistake. Daniel's in Southend. Steer us back to Starmer. Daniel, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome.
Always wanted to say that.
Can I ask why? Why was it today that prompted you to pick up the phone?
It was the intro.
Yeah.
It was you sort of saying, Keir Starmer's not doing much opposing, and it sounded like we were going to go down a route of we just had an appalling Conservative conference. We're hoping that Labour Party conference is going to give the country, a bit of hope. And I just thought, do we really need to have political commentators? Do we really need to have radio show phone-ins that start laying into to Keir Starmer when the government are acting as they were.
It's a fascinating narrative, isn't it? The Tories have just had an absolute catastrophic conference described in all the Tory newspapers as a triumph of unprecedented proportion, and such is the nature of the commentating class that we're thinking about having a bit of a dig at Starmer. It's beautifully explained, Daniel. So I think you want to have a dig at me, or at least you want to speak up for Sir Keir. So fill your boots.
Yeah. So I think that what I want to put out there is I am a Labour Party member. I'm actually an elected councillor in Southend, but I didn't vote for Keir Starmer to be leader. He wasn't my personal choice. So I think, like a lot of people, he's had to convince me. And I think what I have been convinced by is that I think he's taking the right tack on pretty much everything. Opposition for opposition's sake clearly doesn't work. The party have been rejected time and time again for being a party of opposition rather than a party of government in waiting. I think that the manifesto that the Labour Party stood on in 2019 is now completely irrelevant. We put it to the country and the country went a different way. So standing on 2019 pledges is pointless.
Yeah, I need to remind you there are also pledges from his leadership campaign that have been abandoned as well, which are a little bit harder to dismiss, aren't they?
Things change. If you make promises in opposition and then the picture changes, you have a pandemic, Liz Truss tanks the economy, it does change the landscape on what you can achieve. But going back to what you said earlier about Ian Dunt, there possibly being a third way. I actually think the third way is just as bad as him coming out and saying we're going to reverse HS2. And the reason
reverse the reverse, Daniel.
Reverse the reverse.
Thank you.
Of the reversal of the reversal.
Yes, thank you. It's important to get these things correct.
It's very Inception. Yes. But I think that the main problem that we would have is, and I'm not going to use a football analogy, I'm going to use an analogy about Christmas presents.
Perfect.
When people go out there and they speculate and they buy what they think is going to be the hot toy because all the parents want it, and they know that the expectations of the children, i.e. the voters, the electorate in this sense, is that you have promised you're going to get me that present, they have no choice but to get it. So they go onto eBay or they go onto wherever they go and they're paying double, triple the price. And I think if Keir Starmer comes out and says we're going to reverse HS2 or even takes the third way that Ian Dunt had suggested, the speculators will come out. They will buy up all of the land that
so it would do the opposite. It would have the opposite effect. It would bring out the speculators rather than just press pause on the process.
Absolutely. It doesn't press pause at all. It just brings out people who are going to take advantage of the fact that promises have been made and have to be delivered on. And that's the thing, is we know that if a Labour government makes promises and it doesn't deliver on them, we never hear the end of it. When a Conservative government makes promises and they don't deliver on them, they get to press reset every 4 weeks by electing a new leader.
They get to be the change candidate after 13 years of government, mate.
Absolutely.
That's incredible, isn't it? We talked about it a bit yesterday. It is an astonishing flex that you could only make in an ecosystem where you can rely on 80% of the print media. Well,
I think we've seen that Rishi Sunak has got a lot of gall, painting himself as a change candidate, but also, having the absolute brass neck to cancel HS2 to Manchester whilst in Manchester. Yeah. It's a special kind of sort of sadomasochism, really, isn't it?
It's a bizarre thing. I mean, I don't know who he was seeking to please, or indeed whether it has pleased the people he was seeking to please, but it's upset a lot more people than perhaps he expected. Although, they start talking about him as a numbers man, don't they? And he knows what he's doing. He's got lots of spreadsheets. So what? Politics isn't just about spreadsheets. It's about people, and it is people who will seem set to suffer most from this. Thanks for that, Daniel. Was there a moment of? So were you sceptical when he came in? Did you say?
He wasn't the person that.
But you're a shoulder to the wheel type of councillor, I sense.
Yeah, I think that Keir Starmer, as you said, he's not a particularly charismatic person, and he comes across a bit boring. And I felt like we needed something a bit different to sort of go against Boris Johnson's big charisma.
Yeah.
But also, I felt that having had a leader who was an MP in a North London constituency, changing to another leader in a North London constituency only feeds the media narrative of Labour only cares about London. But I think what Keir Starmer has done has shown that actually the Labour Party under his leadership is going to be a listening party and a party of the people. So he's definitely won me over.
It's good to hear. Thank you, Daniel. You're more than welcome, remember, to attack every single syllable that Daniel has just uttered, and indeed that I may have nodded along with on 0345 60973. That bogus narrative about North London is fascinating. It takes a Johnson, though. You see, Sunak tries. But the thing about lying, I find, as I watch liars for a living, is that the liar who somehow psychologically doesn't believe that they're lying. I've been reading a book about cults, and the thing we sometimes miss about cults is the level of belief. So from the outside, it's so obviously bonkers. The world really isn't going to end on Tuesday. Breaking news. But when you're trying to analyse this is why deprogramming people must be so difficult, because they truly believe the world is going to end on Tuesday, or that if they do this, then there will be consequences, divine consequences, uncontemplatable in their horribleness. The person who believes is a much trickier. The person who believes something that isn't true is a much trickier proposition than the person who says something that isn't true, while inwardly either cringing or laughing. Johnson was almost like a believer in his own cult. It was a sociopathic inability to even recognise the difference between truth and lie, because the only question that ever flashed through his mind was, what's best for me? Not the country, not the family, not the company, not the organ that he worked. What's best for me? So sending his lies back from Brussels at the beginning of his career, terrible for the country, terrible for every single aspect of our shared existence, but brilliant for him. His whole career is built on it. What's best for me? So when Sunak tries to typify Keir Starmer as a Islington lawyer, despite the fact that Starmer doesn't live in Islington, and the fact that Boris Johnson did live in Islington with a lawyer, who he was both, of course, married to and cheating on at the time, it's you can tell that Sunak knows it's not just something about authenticity, isn't there? So it's why a really good con man has no conscience. And it's not a compliment to Sunak, but he clearly has at least what passes for a conscience in the place where Boris Johnson just has sort of chopped gammon, really. And that's why it doesn't work. That's what he was referring to. But, of course, when the media pick up the narrative about North London lawyers, then people will believe it, especially people who've got better things to do than pay enormous amounts of attention to the question of which political leader that description fits best. The man who actually lives in Islington with a lawyer, or the man who was Director of Public Prosecutions and doesn't live in Islington. It's 11:17.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
19 minutes after 11 is the time. All right, it's a tickle this, isn't it? Because that suggestion I made a moment ago about the stench of corruption, or even the whiff of perceived corruption hanging over Downing Street because of COVID contracts and failure to investigate apparent fraud and dodgy PPE, and certainly a VIP lane for people who once served Matt Hancock a pint of lager. Just interesting, because did you know that two things actually, I think both unearthed by the newspaper, which I keep telling you is a cracking old read. The company behind HS2, this isn't the perceived sort of dodginess bit of it. Not really, but wait. They bought a property worth over £1.5 million under a compulsory purchase order less than 24 hours before the Prime Minister announced the northern leg of the scheme has been axed. There's a great story by David Parsley, their chief news correspondent. A property agent told him, "We exchanged contracts on a property in Staffordshire on Tuesday for well over £1.5 million. This agent has been acting on behalf of dozens of households impacted by compulsory purchase orders, and was still working on the presumption that the leg would be axed right up until the day before the axe was announced." But another journalist, not at the Eye on this occasion, at ITV, a chap called Nathan Lee, he established a couple of days ago that the video announcing the cancellation was recorded in Downing Street before they went to conference. So, Rishi, I think this matters. I appreciate it's sometimes a little bit hard to be certain what matters and what doesn't. But Rishi Sunak and the rest of them were all giving interviews insisting that no decision had been made in the first 2 days of conference. This chap in Staffordshire was sorting out compulsory purchase orders from the public purse, ultimately, to the tune on this occasion of £1.5 million, which is a drop in the ocean, but the principle seems to me to be important. And Rishi Sunak, Mr. Professionalism, Accountability and Integrity, Rishi Sunak, Mr. Professionalism, Accountability, Mr. Professionalism, Accountability and Integrity, had already recorded the video announcing that they were axing HS2, the second leg of HS2. I think that's grim, personally. Whether it's just poor management, or whether it's an absence of morality, or whether it's just a kind of expression of the contempt in which he truly holds professionalism, accountability and integrity, I don't know. So there's 2 or 3 different things going on here. Maybe you could argue, well, you're so naive. Of course you have to record the announcement of the thing that you say no. Of course you have to record the announcement of the decision that you're insisting hasn't been made before you've actually made it, while still insisting that it hasn't been made. But then you don't get caught for having done in Downing Street. You don't work on such a incompetent basis that it's going to be not obvious, because only this lad at ITV spotted it, but you don't record it at Downing Street before you go to Manchester, while giving interviews all the way to Manchester saying no decision has been made. And the fact that they were still signing cheques right up until the last minute seems to me, and you consider that, you know, we're trying to raise money for really, really good causes today, and there they are chucking £1.5 million up the wall the day before it was announced that the leg was going to be axed. Unfortunate, I think. Suboptimal is what you'd call it. 23 after 11 is the time. Dan's in Newham. Dan, what would you like to say?
Hey, James. So I just wanted to... I think you made a good point about Peter Oborne and his piece on Keir Starmer, because I think it shows if he's lying and being dishonest in opposition, I think it's only going to get worse when it gets to government.
Fair point. What lies, just for people who don't follow stuff as closely as you, what are you categorising as a lie?
So his pledge to bring industries into public ownership, like railways, water, nationalisation and stuff like that, he seems to have abandoned now.
And his explanation for that?
There's been none.
Well, there has.
Tell me.
Well, I'm not here to make the point. I'm here to sort of ask you your reasoning. If you're unaware of the explanations, I mean, part of it is to do with the fact that the compensation that you'd have to pay to the companies that currently owe them is cripplingly high, which makes a fair point on why did he make the promise in the first place. But the explanation of why he's abandoned it is something you should probably have researched before ringing in.
I understood he made the economic argument for it, but I think the case remains the same. If you pledge something and then break it, it doesn't really matter what.
Oh, it does if you explain.
Okay, well, I don't think it's justified, because, you know, we can have the argument against whether you believe in public ownership or not. I think it's a strong case for it. It's very popular amongst people. You've seen those leaked emails between, like, the water companies and the Labour head office, and it seems quite clear that they are, I guess, in cahoots. They don't want to bring nationalisation. So that's one point.
Let's pick up on that. Rachel Reeves explained, I think, didn't she, not Starmer, that the billions of pounds it would cost to nationalise things in the first instance was just not going to be able to be compatible with their fiscal rules. Again, you can make the point that they shouldn't have made the promise in the first place, but then you go back to the huge shift, not just inflation, but of course Liz Truss's little adventure in Downing Street, completely changing the pitch upon which that pledge was made. I mean, listen, I think you are unreachable on this, but for an objective person, the explanation is it's gone quite far towards justifying the decision, and they haven't ruled out future nationalisation of water companies. Labour MPs queuing up after it looked like Thames Water was going to trickle over the edge. Warning that taxpayers may end up paying for those debts anyway. So I think you've slightly misrepresented the Labour Party's position, Dan.
Okay, to move on, another point that Peter Oborne made, I thought was great, about the suppression of democracy within the Labour Party. So you see people, like Mayor Driscoll, for example, who's been elected as a Labour mayor, just being banned from the shortlist, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that's, it's all about the manager picking the team, isn't it, though?
It seems like you're making excuses for Keir Starmer, to be honest. James.
Yeah, I am.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
I am. Yeah.
Well, maybe
not excuses, mate. Explanations.
Yeah. Well, no, it sounds like you're making excuses.
Okay, so how is it not the manager? How is it not the manager picking the team?
Well, Labour's meant to be a democratic party, right? And if you believe in democracy, then you believe members should have a right to stand. No, you know, as long as they
he does have a right to stand, but just not on Keir Starmer's team.
He was elected by members.
Keir Starmer is the manager.
He was actually denied stand. Okay, if you believe in that top-down.
I'm being the devil's advocate, Dan. I'm just being the devil's advocate, Dan. You're making points, and I'm responding to them.
I mean, I don't think you're making.
Should we move on to another one?
Very good. Yeah, okay, let's move on to another one. Again, brought up by Peter O'Born.
Have you got any of your own thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think he makes great points, so let's carry on with these.
So no, you don't?
Well, I do. Okay.
Go on then, give me some of yours. Give me some homegrown wisdom.
Okay, so how about Keir Starmer's close links with MI5, MI6?
Oh, there we go.
Okay. What's wrong with that? That again, Peter O'Born.
Okay. So not you.
Because you don't want to talk about that.
No, tell me about Keir Starmer's close links with MI5 and MI6 then.
Well, I think it's a good point when it comes to foreign policy, if you're having a big influence from MI5 and MI6.
But what are the links?
I can't remember the names, but it's quite.
Well, just give me some evidence. Well, what is it that you're talking about? Live on national radio.
Okay, maybe because I think Peter O'Born would explain it better. Maybe you can invite him onto your show.
But you're here to tell me about these links with MI5 and MI6.
So just meeting up with people for dinner.
Gosh, down with that sort of thing.
Well, I do think.
So you don't think a future prime minister should communicate with security services?
No, not on a personal basis with off the record meetings. No.
Right. So what, they should do it all on live television?
Again, you sound like you're making excuses, James.
No, you sound like you're making a fool of yourself.
You sound like you're making a fool of yourself.
No, you sound like you're making a fool of yourself.
Okay, I mean,
Jeremy Corbyn fan, is it, Dan?
Well, I was, but you know what?
There's a surprise. Tell me again about the links with the secret links with the security services that you know about.
How about you maybe look into it, James, and get Peter O'Born on your show? Because at the end of the day... Dan... Every valid point I brought up, you've made an excuse.
No, I've offered you an explanation. Let's run through them again. So they haven't completely ruled out nationalisation of the industries that you listed. And the reason that they've given for pausing or reconsidering is the complete change in the economic landscape and the imposition of their quite well-established fiscal rules.
Okay, so
in the context of which candidates are going to stand, there's definitely room for argument. And possibly people could have made your argument a little better than you did. But the idea of a manager picking his own team is one that many people will be fairly comfortable with. And then when it comes to the links with MI5 and MI6, the leaflets that you're desperately leafing through that everyone can hear, you probably should have read before you rang in.
Well, I mean, it seems like you've just brushed over every reason I've given.
I've just literally gone back over it and explained in some detail.
So, as a Democratic Party, why do you think it's a good reason?
I've got to go to the news now, Dan, but I'll allow you. Go on, ask me the question. As a Democratic Party, why do you think it's a good reason for what?
To suppress democracy and ban people from standing just because they don't have the same views as you, even though they might be legitimate.
Because it's the party's views that are going to be examined and fought upon the next election.
So you don't believe?
So you can see what happens when a party is riven with people that don't actually want the leadership to win. Dan, you've just shown everybody listening what that sounds like.
Okay, all right. Well, James, I know you're a Starmer fanboy, so let's leave it at that. Yeah.
But let's just to be absolutely clear that you understand how well this has gone for you. You've just demonstrated to everybody listening what happens when you have people within a party movement who don't want it to succeed. So that explains why Starmer has taken a stand on some selection issues. Do you understand that, mate? Or do you need Peter O'Born to explain it to you?
I get it that you don't have any criticism of, or will allow any decent criticism of Keir Starmer.
Well, you missed the opening of the programme then.
I get it.
What time did you tune in today?
Do you know what? Have a good day.
What time did you tune in? Because you missed all the criticism.
It doesn't matter.
At 10 o'clock. Scale of 1 to 10, how well has this gone for you, Dan?
11.
There you go. Jeremy Corbyn fan in a nutshell. It's 11:31. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
25 minutes to 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Starmer will not bring HS2 back to life. Another manifesto commitment broken by Labour, although the explanation that he can't stand there and commit to reversing a decision while Rishi Sunak is in the process of cancelling contracts, releasing the land and reconfiguring Euston Station seems at the very least persuasive to people with their eyes open. But how's it going on otherwise for you as a voter with an open mind, someone whose opinion or voting intentions will be determined by events rather than preconceived prejudices or indeed the tightness of the scarf that's tied round your neck? Carol's in Cambridge. Carol, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello,
it's
Carol.
the Starmer's fangirl here.
Well, you're in very good company, apparently, Carol. Very good company.
Oh, thank you. I want to ring in just to say, well, I think Starmer gets a very bad press. When you think of what he's been doing the last few years, trying to turn Labour round, he's had quite a difficult time after Jeremy Corbyn's watch. Anti-Semitism. He's always knocked for changing his mind, but as the issues change, why shouldn't he change his mind?
There has to be a limit to that, doesn't there?
Yeah,
I don't know if you heard Thor's call earlier. I was poised to start teasing him until he explained rather perfectly why he pursues this sort of what you'd describe as a hardcore centrist position. But you can't change your mind constantly about everything because then you end up standing for nothing.
No, absolutely. And that's why I think next week is his big chance to flesh out policies. He's really got to play a blinder next week because, fair enough, people think that he's a bit dull. I think his qualities are very decent and thoughtful and...
He's less dull in person.
I'm sure.
It's odd, actually. It's because he just doesn't speak as you almost want to grab him by the ears and give him a shake sometimes because there's a lack of fluency or he swallows the odd word and you think, surely you can be taught that. But we're talking about slickness, aren't we, really? And perhaps we overvalue it.
Well, I think we've had enough of slickness with the Tories, actually, and we've been rather, well, not personally, but the country was quite dazzled by Boris.
Yes.
And I think we've got withdrawal symptoms now to a certain extent, and it's like coming off some sort of a drug. And so I'd love England to get real.
Or to at least grow up a bit and start reflecting realities that exist rather than realities that people wish to exist. And I think that applies to both sides of the political divide. Have you been on a journey, or were you signed up pretty early doors, or?
Well, I came over from Dublin about 55 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Escaping from what I found quite oppressive, and at the moment I think, my God, Ireland's yards ahead of us now, and I sort of fear for my children and grandchildren. So I've always been a floating voter. In fairness, I've never voted Tory. It just isn't in my DNA. But
you're going to vote Labour a lot more happily than you would have done in perhaps the last election. You speak for a heck of a lot of us when you say that. To be clear, although we respect the continuing existence of the continuity constituency. Carol, thank you. I kind of actually don't go away yet because I find that fascinating, and probably you do even more. Because I was adopted in 1972 because the Republic of Ireland was such a repressive church-run state. And it does now feel as if the table has been flipped round, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. I mean, they've fought hard for independence from the church for a start. And since then, a lot of the repression has come tumbling down. And okay, it's not perfect.
No, but it reminds you how much can change and how quickly it can change when you've got a prevailing wind behind you. It's truly shocking, actually, or shocking in a good way. if you're looking at it from the Irish side of the sea, or less so if you're looking at it from this side of the sea. But the kind of, I call it bigotry, that used to pass as completely unremarkable in Ireland when I was born, I'd say there's probably now more of it over here than there is. Well, there's definitely more of it over here than there is over there. Thank you, Carol. From Cambridge to Southport. Marion, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Firstly, thanks for everything you do.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you, Marion.
About HS2, the earlier caller said that if Keir Starmer committed to HS2, then the costs would be increased. I disagree with that. I think that if Keir Starmer just said, well, we'll think about it. Let's see if we get some reasonable quotes on doing the work to build it. Maybe if we can reduce the cost to those paid by people on the continent and Japan, we'll see.
The caller was sort of addressing that. He was addressing this line that the inimitable Ian Dunt has punted this morning, that he could have said, we're not ruling it out. We're still minded to do it. And that would...
the wonderful Ian Dunt.
You know what my ego's like, Marion? You know what my ego's like? I'll give out compliments, but I get uncomfortable when people on the show are getting too many. When other people on the show are getting too many. But the problem there is that Sunak is going to tear it down anyway. It doesn't matter what you say, does it, as leader of the opposition? If contracts are being cancelled, Ian's theory is that the land, may become less attractive for sale. You could say the opposite. If you're a speculator and Labour have said, you know what, we might come back in for this, and Rishi Sunak puts the land up for sale, you think, well, I'll tell you what, that's at a bit of a knockdown price. That could rocket if they decide to reopen HS2. I'm going to get... So it could cut the other way.
But if he doesn't rule it out, that would put mockers on that a bit, wouldn't it? I don't know. If he leaves it so you can't go on either side, then are people going to...
I don't think he's ruled out ruling it. I mean, certainly looking at his words, that sounds a little bit the thick of it, doesn't it? But looking at his words...
Just like Keir Starmer.
He's saying, I can't stand here after they've made such a big hole in their plans and say, I will simply reverse it. So he's not saying I'm standing here and saying I definitely won't reverse it. He's saying I can't say that I will reverse it, which I do think. I know it sounds semantic, but I do think they're two slightly different things.
But to come down on either side, it has got its problems, hasn't it?
Yes.
Whereas if it doesn't come down on either side, he just says, well, we'll think about it. Let's see whether we get some reasonable talks with people.
I think he's closer to saying that than perhaps we've allowed through the rest of this conversation. Telegraph says he has said he will not build the second phase of HS2. But when you dig into his words, and he said, I can't commit to reversing the decision, I don't know. Well, we won't know, will we, unless we've got a crystal ball. But I take your point. It would a holding pattern would feel a little bit more hopeful for people who really want it built, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I've got no interest in HS2, really. I'm listening to the arguments and I think, fair enough, it makes us look like we're a 21st century instead of a 19th century country.
Yeah.
I guess all that. So I've come down on the side of building it, but it'll make no difference to my life.
When you say that, you never know. I mean, it depends when it's finished, doesn't it? It could be, if it carries on the current trajectory, it could be the year 3000. Busted will be singing about the HS2 second link if we're not careful. Thank you, Marion. Andy, a lot from this neck of the woods today. Andy's also in Liverpool. Andy, what would you like to say?
Hi, morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Just obviously from a Liverpool perspective, Liverpool's obviously a staunch socialist city, as you know. I just think he's doing okay, but I just think he needs to clearly elaborate more his policies. You know what I mean? There's a lot of bickering in Liverpool about him, which is not unusual for Liverpool.
I don't think the words about him were unnecessary in that sentence, Andy.
It's just, because people always get tied up with ideology in Liverpool and this and that, but I think he's doing okay, but I do think he needs to set out his policies a bit clearer and what he, not just to...
Yeah, I agree.
What just he means to Middle England, but what he means to ordinary working class people as well, who literally his constituency.
It's an offer, and the defence that we don't know what we're going to be inheriting, which you can put in place perhaps when you're diluting or even abandoning previous pledges, the closer you get And in a country with fixed term elections, he's got a year, give or take weeks.
Exactly.
The closer you get to that, the harder it becomes to say, well, let's wait and see until we're in power.
Exactly.
I wonder what's going to happen in your town next week. I wonder just how big an offer is going to be described to the population.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think, let's face it, James, after the shambles of the Tory conference again this week.
How dare you say that? It was an Honor Lloyd triumph, copyright Daily Telegraph.
He's got an open goal, hasn't he? But it's, as we all know in this country, it's as soon as the Mail and the Express will pick up on the slightest little thing, and then we start getting dragged into all kinds of different analogies, then different agendas. But if he can just set out something clearly, I do think he's got a bit of an open goal at the moment, because I do genuinely think people are crying out for change.
Well, that's for sure. And I don't know if you heard the clip of him in Rutherglen in Scotland.
No, I never know.
I'll play it actually after this break just for you. Actually, that's bespoke radio. That is, Andy. That's like I'm doing requests on a phone-in show. That's a first. Yeah. But I didn't comment on it at the time because it was in a bulletin. But the number of times he said change in the context of that by-election victory, off the back of Rishi Sunak hilariously trying to cast himself as the change candidate, as the head of a party that's been in government for 13 years. I think change, well, as you would attest, saying the word several times in 5 seconds is very different from actually making announcements next week that would constitute proper change. Have you got that? We haven't got that clip, have we? Or from the bulletin of because I know we've got some guests up next, so I don't want to interfere with their moment on the show. Have we got the clip of no, never mind. I'll tell you what happened. Keir Starmer said change about 8 times in the space of 8 sentences. Change, 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 change. It's like listening to David Bowie.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:49 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Global's Make Some Noise is LBC's charity. And today is Make Some Noise Day. That's why we are raising money for small projects, helping those living through the toughest of circumstances, whether that's people with serious mental health issues or people suffering domestic abuse, dealing with physical disabilities, homelessness, loneliness. The list is almost endless. I'm joined in the studio now by Fifi, and Stephen is back from Youth Concern, which, as you know, is just one of the small charities benefiting from the appeal this year. Youth Concern is based in Aylesbury and works with vulnerable young people aged 13 to 25. Services include counselling, a drop-in centre and homelessness prevention. We heard quite a lot in the last hour about how that work is done and how important it is for you to help us to support them today. Fifi, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Didn't I see you on BBC News recently? I'm just establishing Fifi's broadcast credentials before we came on the radio.
Yeah.
How did you find out about Youth Concern?
I found out about Youth Concern by a staff member that started there like 2 years ago as well. I was at college the time when I actually met her. She told me that she was leaving me. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to come with you as well. I'm going to have see what actually happens there, what happens. Obviously, when I went there, I was a bit nervous, like I am right now.
Don't be, it's only me.
It was where I was nervous at the same time, but I had her there as well. But it was just where I felt like having a club there, having a drop-in, it makes it more better for other children.
What was it like? Can you remember the first time you went in?
The first time, I think I was just nervous and I just sat down. I was just sitting on the chairs. I was looking around and everyone, on my days, what are they looking at me like? Everyone was just looking at me.
Because, I mean, a new arrival anywhere is going to cause quite a lot of interest. And what does it do that you can't find anywhere else? What makes it so special?
I feel like it makes it special to me because, I don't know, you make a lot of friends and you get really close with other members there as well, staff members. I
don't want to pry, but what was going on in your life that made Youth Concern so valuable for you?
Well, what made it so valuable is just they help out. They help me out with a lot of stuff. I don't really have a lot of family around here. So
okay.
It was just where I had someone to talk to. Where
stuff that other young people perhaps
Yeah.
take for granted. They just don't. You don't have the advice that you need about stuff and the help that you need navigating the approach of adulthood, really.
Yeah. I mean, I was 12 when I moved here.
Right.
From Jamaica.
Yes.
So obviously, I'm living with my dad, and it was where, I don't know, like, I was at home. Home just felt so like, you're just stuck there. You don't know where else to go. Then you find somewhere where you can stay, you feel safe, you know that you're going to be there with other young people and have fun.
Stephen, we hear a lot about, and it's often sometimes couched in the language of cliche, isn't it? That young people need somewhere else to go, and someone else says, well, youth clubs aren't going to stop knife crime or what. I mean, the issues are so much more complicated than that. When someone like Fifi arrives at Youth Concern, what are your top priorities?
I think for us, it goes back to what I said as well, is about the relationship. I think that young person may have faced many, many challenges in their life, and I think we are that safety net of young people and how we can support them. And we have a platform to show that. And at Youth Concern, we have a range of services that allows the young people to thrive. And it's all about that relationship when they first come through. So when Fifi first came through, how did it make her feel? It's the staff that makes her feel invited and supported. And then they build that relationship up to make sure they get the best impact possible. And you'll hear from Fifi and how much she enjoys it and how much she has been supported. And yeah.
How much time do you spend there, Fifi? Why is that funny? 23 hours and 47 minutes a day.
I mean, probably more. Like, it's open to Tuesday to Saturday.
Okay.
And I usually go there like almost every day since.
And were you
I've been
lonely
there.
before? What's it addressing? Is it?
It's addressing where I know that I can go to a place where I don't have to be going out on the streets.
Yeah.
Just walking around, doing other stuff. Then I can be in a place where I can be with young people, chill with them, have fun, play the pool table, tennis table, talk to the staff.
Because there's very few options for people your age.
Yeah.
I think if you don't want to be cooped up at home all the time.
No.
Whether it's just because you're getting bored, or whether it's because for some young people, home isn't a terribly healthy place to be, and then you come out of the house, where are you going to go? Unless you've got a lot of money in your pocket, your options are incredibly limited.
It really is.
And that's where Youth Concern really kicks in.
Yeah.
By providing a destination and a welcome, I think.
Yeah.
Can you tell me something about some of the other young people there? Can you tell when a new arrival arrives? Can you tell when they're kind of in a bad place?
When a new arrival applies, well, I don't know. It's not really my station to say, but like obviously, when something happens, like just anything, someone is homeless.
Yeah.
They have a little space where they stay. All their stuff is there.
I didn't know that. So they've just got somewhere safe to keep their stuff.
Yeah, somewhere safe to keep their stuff, just in case like they don't want to be going back home. We have this food bank as well. We opened this last year, and obviously I helped out with the BBC News. That was when I opened it. We help out young people on if they can't have the supplies at home to cook any food, or they don't have any money, we supply them with a food bank. So we have specific stuff in a bag to put in the fridge to cook like a meal 3 times.
A specific meal, so they know what they're doing. They're not throwing anything away, and they don't get to the end of the recipe and think, oh my God, I haven't got any, I don't know, desiccated coconut or whatever it might be that they need on the thing. Is it normal, Steve, for people who receive help from Youth Concern to become part of the process of giving help to others later in their journey?
Yeah, that's a big thing for myself as well as Youth Concern. I think it's important that the journey is not just coming in and getting a food parcel. It's about coming in and getting a food parcel, making friends and building connections, and then hopefully what Fifi does is going to the youth panel. So she is a voice of young people, of Youth Concern, and she is kind of leads by example of chat to the young people to find out what they want to do with the youth centre, because I think it's important that the young people are involved in all designs of all programmes and projects, because the young people are facing many challenges, and I think they have a say in what should happen in their life, and Fifi's the voice of that, and what she does with the youth panel allows that change to happen, because she raises the voice up and part of the youth panel, and that's a great job that they do and how they can support each other.
On the homelessness question, it must be tough for you not to be able to find, because I didn't realise that a homeless youngster might turn up with their bag, and you can keep their bag safe, but you're going to have to turn them out at some point.
Yeah. So
that must be really tough for you as a human.
That is. It's very tough in terms of what you need to deal with. In some cases we can get them housed.
Yes.
Because what with different authorities and
vulnerability, age, location,
there's so many
postcode.
criteria in terms of what you need to do and what the challenges are. The good thing is we have the next step, which has 9 beds in terms of that support. Then we're going to be full very soon.
Sure.
And I think it's having those opportunities, but I think it's a massive challenge we face just now is young homelessness, and there's so much criteria that you need to follow, but you can't get into a house because you follow a certain criteria. I think it's very, very hard in terms of how that work happens.
It is. Fifi, what would you say to someone listening to this now and thinking, do you know what, I think I'll make a donation. I think I'll make a donation to make some noise and help us help Youth Concern.
Well, for other children out there, obviously we heard of big charities, known charities, but for Youth Concern, what Youth Concern does is to help other young people. So if you guys, I don't want to say, you have to donate.
Oh, it's okay.
But,
doing great.
You know, if we didn't get any funding or donations, it wouldn't be Youth Concern. It wouldn't be where it will be built and people can be around, just helping other people that are just helpless.
Yeah, so there would be a cold and empty space where now we've got a place of warmth and welcome.
I like it because we keep a lot of people nowadays we're getting a lot of new people coming through.
Yeah, it's 600 so far.
Good Lord.
So it's just under 700.
And stress again, this is Aylesbury, which you think of as a
there's about 700 individual young people coming, and I think just under 5,000 engagements coming through the door this year so far, just shy of a year. And in terms of the footfall coming through.
And the numbers are growing all the time, I think.
Consistently growing month on month. On an average, 100 young people are coming through each month.
Staggering, absolutely astonishing stuff. And I do know that times are tough for everyone right now, but when you hear from people like Fifi and Stephen, you realise that just a few pounds, the price of a coffee or a Friday night takeaway, as I said earlier, can make a very big difference. So if you can, please donate right now. Whatever you can afford will make an incredible difference. And you will be joining listeners right across the country who are currently making a big difference every second. Let me run you through the specifics of the Youth Concern situation. So £40 could pay for a one-on-one counselling session for a young person in a bad place, experiencing mental health difficulties of all sorts of kinds. £20 could enable Youth Concern to buy personal hygiene and sanitary products for a vulnerable young person who can't get it anywhere else. I think that's a crucial point to make. There is no provision in place. There's no safety net in some areas of our society, and Youth Concern sort of steps into that vacuum. £10 for essential clothing items that someone who doesn't have a roof over their head is, again, going to be unable to get anywhere else. And £5 could contribute to the Youth Concern Youth Food Bank that Fifi just described to us all. So to donate, £40, £30 or £20, just text LBC 40, LBC 30, LBC 20, no spaces, to 70766. That's LBC 40, LBC 30 or LBC 20 without a space to 70766, or give what you can online at lbc.co.uk. 100% of any donation you make will go to Global's Make Some Noise. You've got to be 16 or over. Do seek the bill payer's permission. Standard network charges may apply, or again, as I say, you can donate what you can afford online and see all the terms and conditions at makesomenoise.com. Thank you, Fifi. Was that all right? Was it as terrifying as you expected? Was it okay?
It was okay.
Any tips for me? Do you think I could improve my microphone technique at all? I get some tips from a professional. Anything?
No, it's okay.
You did a great job. Thank you, Fifi. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to everyone who donates from all of us here at LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 6 minutes after 12. I mean, if anyone bothers to do the work, I think the salting of the earth analogy that we started with at the top of the show is going to be particularly pertinent to this HS2 story. Just doing stuff now that will make it prohibitively expensive, if not impossible, for a Labour government installed a year from now to reverse it and do what they consider to be best for the country. I could be wrong, but there's a bloke on Twitter called Tom Forth who's incredibly good at crunching data, and he's done some work in this field already today, pointing out that it's probably over. He says, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Very little of the new stuff will happen. Some of it's already been cancelled. A lot was so poorly researched by the UK government team who wrote the documents that it's already done. I don't think there's any room for optimism. This is, as he describes, the earth is being salted and the wells are being poisoned, which is such cynical politics. Maybe it's so obviously cynical that the only real attempt to attack Keir Starmer that we've heard during the last 2 hours came from a Jeremy Corbyn admirer, not from a Tory. That's going to be electorally very, very interesting. But that may just be that no Tories are listening to the programme anymore. Who knows? 7 after 12 is the time. Right, I've got a completely mad one for you now. That was a joke, by the way. We did an entire show where only Tory voters were allowed to ring in earlier this week. But I think this is really, really interesting. And it's one of those stories that, depending what your age is, depending on your age, I think your reaction is going to be completely different. Age and experience, but especially age. The best example of this week was Rishi Sunak's smoke and mirrors smoking ban. Copyright me. The smoke and mirrors smoking ban, because you responded to it like I did. You imagined a world in which you were 14 and it was being announced that anyone who's currently 14 will never be able to buy a cigarette. And you found yourself thinking, wow, that's incredible. Or you found yourself thinking, wow, that's really unfair. I loved my 20 Woodbine when I was 14 years old. So he announces something that is happening to 14-year-olds, and most of us automatically start channeling our inner 14-year-old. But in fact, if you speak to any 14-year-olds, they would have greeted that announcement of Rishi Sunak's this week with the mother of all mez. Mez is, like meh, M-E-H, meh, yeah? Yeah? So, because they're like, well, none of my friends smoke. None of them want to smoke. Only idiots smoke. Vaping, that's a big issue. That's a big problem. But in terms of us planning to smoke cigarettes when we grow up, or next week, or sneaking around the back of the... When was the last time you saw... I don't know if you've hosted any teenage parties lately, but I've had the privilege of having to clear up after a few, and I can tell you now that even with 100 kids... I've got the number of, you can still call them fag ends, can you? The number of cigarette butts or fag ends that I'm clearing up in conjunction with the hostesses, let me stress. I'm not suggesting for a minute that I do it all single-handedly, but there just aren't any. There's none, whereas when I was 14 or 15 or 16 or 18 or 25 and you had a party in your garden, you'd be out there all day the day after trying to pick up all the fag butts. So it just doesn't happen. So you respond to that announcement according to where you were when you were 14 or how close to 14 you are. So in retrospect, I'd like to retract my praise for Rishi Sunak that was offered up yesterday or the day before and say, really, it is it's not bold. It's the right thing to do, but it's not a very big deal. It'd be a bit like banning me from eating lettuce. Actually, I eat quite a lot of lettuce. It'd be a bit like banning me from eating marzipan. I hate marzipan. It's the only thing I don't like. Whenever the waitress comes over or the waiter comes over and says, is there anything you're allergic? I say, I'm not actually allergic to it, but I can't eat marzipan. And she says, sir, you're in a sushi restaurant. The likelihood of you being served marzipan is pretty slim. But it's a bit, so banning cigarettes for 14-year-olds is a bit like banning, I don't know, banning ice trays for Eskimos or something like that anyway. 10 minutes after 12 is the time. So this story, I think, is a bit like that. It's in France, but we're going to talk about it from our perspective. Parents could be barred from posting photographs of their children on social media and prosecuted if they flout the ban under a pioneering French bill. Now, I thought when I first read that it was daft, just for a nanosecond, because I'm approaching it from my generational perspective. And Facebook was still relatively new when I became a parent, and it was perfectly normal to post pictures of your babies or pictures of your children on there. A pal of mine who's recently become a parent put something up there, and sadly the relationship with the mother has not survived the arrival of the baby. But he put something up recently that said, my daughter's mother has asked me not to put up any pictures of the baby. And my initial reaction was, crikey, that seems a bit strict. But then I started thinking about it, and there are a number of reasons why a child may retrospectively wish that a parent hadn't put up pictures, and why a parent may wish pretty quickly that they hadn't done the same. Some of them are relatively silly, but some of them are really, really serious. Should we get the really ugly one out of the way first? With AI and things like that now, you can manipulate images in some pretty hideous ways, but you would need the raw material imagery to begin with. So let's be pretty clear on that, okay? You've also got very specific cases of child protection. So if a child has been taken into care or adopted, then adoptive parents are very, very good and very conscious of not putting up pictures of their children, because there may be biological family members who are keen to track a baby down. But the French politician who's bringing this in isn't looking at that. So I don't want to dismiss that or minimize it or anything like that. I just want to recognize it, but stress that that's probably not what our conversation is going to be about. This is what the French politician, it's a chap called Bruno Studer, he's in President Macron's party, and he said he wants to clamp down on parents who, and I quote, endlessly share their children's private life on social media from morning to night. When they are asleep, when they are ill, when they are in the bath, when they are eating, when they are having a tantrum. There's also fads that involve parents playing pranks on their children and posting the film of it on social media. An egg crack challenge where you crack an eggshell on a child's head, a cheese challenge in which you slap each other around the face, or you throw slices of cheese at babies. I don't understand an awful lot of this stuff, but what I do understand is this politician's description of, and I quote, a serious attack on the dignity of the child. Where are you now? Right now, what are you thinking? Are you thinking this is far too? This is breaking a butterfly on a wheel. This is taking a relatively small problem far too seriously. Or, I think, depending upon your age and experience, are you going, yeah, actually, I know it's quite hard to explain, but I absolutely hate how much of my childhood my mum and dad put on Facebook. I really hate how much of my childhood. I hate it. Phone lines are already open, 0345 60060973. So the law is designed to make sure that parents understand, and I quote, that their children's image does not belong to them, but they have to protect it. And he's gone so far as to say that a family court judge, if alerted by a social worker or a grandparent or even a prosecutor to any excessive posting of photographs, the judge would be able to warn the parents to stop, and if they continued, they could be stripped of their right to share any images at all of any child ever on social media, up to and including a €45,000 fine. So they cite an example of a 23-year-old so-called influencer who posts pictures of her two young children and filmed herself accidentally treading on her toddler's fingers while trying on a pair of shoes and put it on to social media. So that's the background, that's the context, that's the case in France, the political proposal in France that could become a pioneering French bill. I want you to step back a bit from that and just think about your own life. I don't need persuading because I'm a lot more open-minded than I used to be. And if somebody tells me there's a problem, I don't automatically respond by going, oh, no, there isn't. 30p Leenock inevitably has been claiming that ADHD is a consequence of bad parenting this week. It's almost as if every half-baked idea that idiots would ring into radio stations with 20 years ago have been embodied in human form and made deputy chairman of the Conservative Party. All the nonsense about food banks, all the nonsense about immigration, all the casual, lazy insults to places like Bradford, and now ADHD, which we used to take phone-ins on it, and I would say stupid things like, we just called it being naughty in my day. But then you actually take the time and put in the effort to understand things. And the idea that a politician, a senior politician, can come out with something as obnoxious as that at a time when families with ADHD in their ranks are very, very worried about drugs and medicine shortages, for the deputy chairman of the Conservative Party to come out and insult every single one of them within hours of being forced to remove footage from his own social media accounts of him libelling a journalist. Just breathtaking, the levels of incompetence that are now inhabiting the upper echelons of the Conservative Party. But the point I'm making is I'm not lazily going to swing now at this and say, well, it's all a bit silly, because the more I think about it, the more I find myself wondering, what's it like to really regret and even perhaps resent the amount of photographs, images of you as a baby, as a child, as a youngster, were put out there forever by your parents. There was a picture of me in the bath, on a beach, trying to get changed, and I forget how it happened, but there was a photograph of me as a kid with without anything on. I was only 6 or something, and I was so mortified by that. But when I was about 10 or 11 years old, if we're going through the family album, and you could see so before puberty, I was still stressed by it. After puberty, maybe less so. But suddenly thinking, if that family picture had been on Facebook, it would be there forever. Every new girlfriend that you had could look it up and find a picture of you in the bath when you were 4. So could your enemies. I don't know if I'm thinking of the wrong things, but the more I think about this, and I don't want parents who've done it to start feeling bad all of a sudden. We've all kind of done something in this area, but because I'm so old and grizzled now, it's quite odd for me to have someone of my age becoming a parent now. And that was something that I noticed on Facebook, saying one of the parents said, we don't want any images at all up on Facebook, and I kind of get it. So we can have the conversation about the policy, which is a good old, what do you think of it? 0345 6060 973. But actually, what about the lived experience? Do you really regret the amount of pictures of your children that you put on social media when it was new and you were young? 0345 6060 973. Or what is it about this? What is it about what your parents did that really, really hacks you off? And I bet it's quite frustrating that not everybody immediately appreciates the depth of your feeling on this. Is it? Well, I do, and I will. I think this is probably a really good idea. It might not be the perfect policy, but the general mood, the direction of traffic, of saying, you've actually got no right. You wouldn't stick it on a billboard, would you? You've got no right to take your child's image and disseminate it all around the world in a way that will never, ever, ever be retractable. You can never take it back. I think this is a bigger deal than even I appreciated 10 minutes ago, and I was patting on myself on the back 5 minutes ago for appreciating what a big deal it is. I'll shut up now and take some calls. 0345 6060 973. It's 12:19.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 22 minutes after 12. Thank you to Martin for making me smile. How can you not like marzipan, he writes. You may have just lost a listener. I can't do this phone-in for reasons that should be fairly obvious. But I'd love to do... What's the craziest reason you've got for not listening to a radio show anymore? But it's only really funny if it's my show. So what's the funniest reason for not listening to this show anymore? That's never going to work. It reminds me of the time I got halfway down the sentence of saying, in response, I've told you this a million times, in response to the percentage of people who had no phone, landline or mobile. And I was so drawn to that story. I did what I always do when I'm drawn to a story. I tried to turn it into a phone-in. So I got about 3 words away. I got halfway down the question, give me a call if you haven't got a phone. 0345 6060 973. Give me a call if you haven't got a phone. 23 after 12. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this. Parents putting their children on social media face court threat. Laura is in Cambridge. Laura, what do you think?
Hi, first of all, fully with you on the marzipan.
It's the devil's food.
Yeah. I've got a 14-month-old daughter, and me and my husband, before she was born, had the conversation around, the internet and social media. I think there's 3 things that, 3 reasons why we don't want her image on there. One, you don't know who is accessing it. I know that's probably a bit of a pessimistic view, but
it's also true. You can put all your filters and stuff in place, but you've got no control over that image once it's out there.
Exactly. 2, until she's old enough to decide how she wants her image to be used, it is her image. We have no right to distribute it, we don't feel. And 3, I don't want her to grow up thinking that it's normal to have your whole life posted on social media. I think it was only a few weeks ago you did a call where, a phone-in where you were talking about, young girls with self-confidence issues because of social media and everything that's on there, and we want her to keep as far away from that as long as we can. We're not naive to think she'll never be on it and never be influenced by it, but we want to do our part to make sure it's it's when she's much older and able to.
You put it like that. It makes perfect sense. It really does. How common is your attitude among your peers, among sort of your NCT group or the equivalent?
Yeah, I think really common now. We had we had a birthday party with all of our NCT group and all the babies, and I kind of messaged beforehand to say, please don't put any pictures of Ali on social media, and pretty much most of the mums came back and said exactly the same. Don't worry, we don't want them posted either. So I think my attitude is probably a growing norm.
Well, it clearly is, isn't it? So that's I tell you what, I got it right when I said that responses to this story are going to depend exactly on where you are generationally and parentally, because there'll be people listening who are nearer my age than yours who can't quite believe there is, because it didn't cross our minds that there was something wrong with posting pictures of birthday parties, or maybe not bath time, but birthday parties. But your arguments make perfect sense.
Yeah, and it probably wasn't an issue back then as much because,
well, we hadn't seen the damage it would do. We didn't know that children.
Exactly.
What do your parents think? What do the grandparents think about it?
They're totally fine,
My
sister, her aunties, all that, they're all totally fine with the decision. They all agree, they all understand.
You haven't got one of those in-laws.
You
haven't got one of those in-laws going, I can't believe it. So it's just
we're very lucky.
Don't they realise we've raised children ourselves? Honestly, these young people today, they think they've invented parenting. Can't put a picture of the birthday.
No, we are very, very lucky with both our parents, and they totally understand.
Wow. Thank you, Laura. Perfect first call, because you just explain it in a completely unsensational way. That's just the new normal. And yet I don't want anyone from my kind of era to think that they did anything wrong. It's just the world has turned. I've said a few times when it comes to fears, justified fears about technology and the internet in particular, and then the unjustified fears, the moral panic element of it, normally these things sort themselves out. It's just trying to limit the damage that is done before they do. 27 after 12 is the time. Jenny's in Brighton. Jenny, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James. Yes, I was just listening to you and it really struck a chord with me, actually, because in 2014, so 9 years ago, I posted a picture of my little girl who'd fallen asleep in her bed holding a helium balloon.
Aww.
And it was cute, exactly. It was cute. It was a statement. It was, I've had a lovely day.
Yeah. I've had a great party.
And I posted it on Facebook and everybody loved it. It was all positive comments.
When was this? Can I ask when this was?
2014.
14, yes.
So 9 years ago. And so she would have been 5 and a half at the time. And she'd fallen asleep in her bed with this helium balloon attached to her hand or her wrist. And I actually took it off her, but for obvious reasons. But I took a picture, put it on Facebook, and everyone loved it. And then one person came on and commented. Now, this person who commented was going through the adoptive process in Austria
at
that time.
So they were hypersensitive then?
The hypersensitive, they'd been through all the policies and procedures, possibly even looked at the online effects of this sort of thing. And the message was really negative from her, and it said, "You've just breached your daughter's privacy. You shouldn't be posting this." And everyone kind of was a bit shocked at the reaction. And the relationship between myself and her was that we'd known each other since we were 16, so 30 years.
Yeah.
And I'd sung at her wedding, she'd been at mine, and so it was a family friendship where you had students come over from different countries. So she knew my family. It affected my family friendship relationship.
Of course it
and
did.
it was quite divisive in the fact that my parents were siding with her.
Really?
And it was yes, I know, but they did.
Well, I mean, the consolation prize is that you were very ahead of the curve on this, Jenny. But that's not much. That's not much consolation, is it, to the difficulties you describe?
No, I mean it's something. I don't speak to them now, and
what, your parents?
No. The people in Austria.
Oh, thank goodness for that. I was going to say, flipping out. I'm going to get my peacekeeper hat on this one. Then you can't stop. So if it was Brexit, I'd get it, but not over one photo. But I mean, but do you see? Do you think 9 years later? Do you think she had more of a point than you thought at the time? For the record, I think she handled it very insensitively and unkindly. But 9 years ago, I think I'd have been like, "Oh, get over yourself." Whereas now, I'm like, I do actually see your point.
Well, I took the stand off. She's my daughter. She's in a loving family home.
Yes.
She's not under social services. She's not under any kind of care order or anything. She's fine, and I can do what I want with. She's my daughter.
To which? Yeah, go on.
That was how I. Sorry to cut you off. That was how I felt about it.
Yes. And do you still?
No, less so. I mean, it's theatre trips now when we're excited in the theatre.
And she knows what you're doing, and she's old enough to have some sort of agency on it, isn't she?
Yeah. She will consent or not. And she will consent or not now.
And the in case anyone's wondering, the reason why the adoption would be pertinent is that the rules governing, or certainly the advice governing what you can and can't do in that, has all sorts of ramifications for the biological family and the adoptive family. So it's going to be. So she probably shouldn't have brought that to your party or to your Facebook page. But other elements of it, it's just got more mileage than you would have thought 9 years ago. Thank you, Jenny. Beautifully explained. 12:30 is the time. Amelia Cox has the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
12:34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I just want to clarify something that you may have thought I was exaggerating earlier when I mentioned how many times. Do you think someone has told Keir Starmer that he needs to say the word change a lot? Just putting it out there.
We get the chance now to lay out our positive case for change when we go to our conference in Liverpool. But because we have changed, we are the hope of change. Because we've changed, we can answer the question, why Labour? Because we've changed, we are hungry for power. And because we're changed, we are ready to serve across Scotland and across the United Kingdom.
I got six. I'm going to do it. Can I do a ding ding on this one? Can we do it again? Let's go.
We get the chance now to lay out our positive case for change when we go to our conference in Liverpool. But because we have changed, we are the hope of change. Because we've changed, we can answer the question, why Labour? Because we've changed, we are hungry for power. And because we're changed, we are ready to serve across Scotland and across the United Kingdom.
I got 5 that time. How many did you get? 6. 6. Did I do 6 things? Or did I miss one? Oh, I missed one. We can't do it again, can we? So, anyway, just say, hashtag just saying. He has said change quite a lot, hasn't it? And it's 2 types of change, which is quite interesting. He is the candidate for change, but also driving home that Labour has changed. Absolutely crucial part of his mission. Perhaps you could say even more so in Scotland than everywhere else. But so Penny Mordaunt is fighting. Fighting. If someone next to you stands up and fight them. Fight. And Keir Starmer is changing. What do you want, fighting or changing? What's Rishi Sunak doing? He's changing as well. Oh, it's so confusing. Can I have a minute now? Do you mind? Just to talk to you about Make Some Noise, because I am aware of all the demands upon your kindness that appear in front of you. It sometimes seems it is almost every day, you know. It might be someone selling the big issue or collecting money outside the supermarket. But the reason why I love Make Some Noise, why I'm really proud to be part of the company responsible for launching this movement, I think I'd call it, is because of the parts it reaches, because of the way we've met some amazing people today. But there's one story I always remember, and it was a charity that helps families of children born missing a limb. It's a charity that we've helped in previous years, but there was a line that a little lad said to me that I've never forgotten, and it kind of sums up the kind of charities that we help. And I said, talking about going away for the whole weekend with family and with other families, like a big camp of other families where one child or more had been born without a limb. And I said, why is it such a big deal? And I wasn't going through the motions. I hope you know that I'd make a real effort when these children come into the studio to make them feel relaxed and to really try and get into their story. But it's not like asking questions on the normal show when I've got a rough idea of what every answer is going to be. And so I said, why is it such a big deal to go away on these weekends, these special weekends that you go away together? And I remember he said, because I don't stand out. And no one asks me any questions about my arm. And of course, every family there has been through the same thing. And the sibling, his sister, doesn't have to explain. No one asks his sister about why her brother's only got one arm. And I just thought, that doesn't reach, does it? You don't get that with the massive charities, the ones that can afford the huge advertising campaigns. You don't get into the really tiny specifics of it, the really personal stuff. And then we've given a lot in the past, or you have given a lot in the past, and we have passed it on to mental health charities, which you'll know are very close to my heart. Mental health for young people, very close to my heart. The situation now of what is officially available is dire. It's beyond dire. I know of people in my professional and my personal life who cannot get seen. And there's a trigger warning here for you, but until you've actually attempted to take your own life, you can't get an appointment with some mental health services, some children and young adult mental health services. It's got to have got that bad. And there are charities that will step into the breach. We've met them in previous years. And speaking to Fifi and to Stephen and to Anna earlier from Youth Concern in Aylesbury, very specific to the problems of that town and the issues of that town. And it'd be just like any other town in the country. But they've found the problems and they're fixing the problems. And that I'll tell you the bit that stuck with me, actually, was something Fifi said about homeless young people. And remember, they only work with 13 to 25-year-olds. So you're looking at someone potentially who's, really young. And they get a locker to put their stuff in, even when they can't help them find a bed for the night. The benefit of having a locker, I think about that. I don't know whether you've got children or how old they are. But just, if that's the only place they can stick their stuff so that it can stay safe and dry, you get an idea of why the decision was taken some years ago to focus on charities that you never normally hear about. Yeah? And that's why I wanted just to take a moment on this one to remind you of the kind of work that we do. So in the case of Youth Concern, it touches a lot of the things I've just alluded to. £40 gets a counselling session for someone who's not going to be able to get it anywhere else. That could be someone suffering suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, all manner of issues. And the point is this: they're not getting help anywhere else. This isn't the day for asking why they're not or whether they should. Of course they should. And we know why they're not. But they're not. And that's what we can just address together. £20, you could help someone get the hygiene and the sanitary products for a vulnerable young person. You're homeless, washing is hard. And carrying around shampoo. Or just not being able to afford it. It's just grim. And you know it's real because there's 1 million young people in this country who don't have a bed of their own. £10, you could get essential clothing items, like new pants. It's not dance around this one. It's not essential clothing. It's new pants, socks. Haven't got holes in. £10. £5, a bag of food at the food bank. Food they can prepare themselves if they've got a place to live. Food they can eat if they haven't. And that's it. That's all it is. So come on, help me out on this one. It's LBC 40 to give £40, LBC 30 to give £30, LBC 20 to give £20. No spaces, so you just text LBC 40 or LBC 30 or LBC 20, LBC 40, LBC 30, LBC 20. No spaces, and you text it to 70766. 70766. And if those figures are unhelpful to you, you can donate any number you want, any figure you want, any amount you want at lbc.co.uk. You can knock yourself out on this one. 100% of your donation goes to Global's Make Some Noise. 16 and over only, don't forget. Seek the bill payer's permission. Standard network charges may apply. You can find all the terms and conditions and another opportunity to make a donation of any size you want, however big or small. It all helps at makesomenoise.com. And that's it, really. I just wanted to stress that because sometimes we get a bit caught up in the merry-go-round of people coming in and people coming out. But this isn't like normal stuff. This is a really, really unique and important organisation that does incredible work. And I know that it does incredible work because I get to deliver the good news. And some years we give charities more than they'd asked for, more than they were expecting. We do all the due diligence, we do all the research into what it will be spent on and where it will be going. And we talk a lot about the beneficiaries of the charity, but when you see the volunteers or the charity workers, knowing that for the next 12 months they don't need to worry about that, that's paid for, that's done and dusted, then you get an idea of why it means so much to me. That's all I'm saying.
Today, all of Global comes together for Global's Make Some Noise Day, supporting small charities that need your help more than ever. Global's Make Some Noise Day on LBC.
Global's Make Some Noise is LBC's charity. Over the past 10 years, your donations have made a difference in communities across the UK. This year, you can help Tiny Tickers, a small national charity working to improve the early detection, care and treatment of babies with congenital heart disease. Sebastian's parents, Jen and Robin, who I met earlier, have been supported by Tiny Tickers ever since they discovered at the 20-week scan that Sebastian had a serious heart defect.
My husband and I had been trying for a baby for about 4 years, and our miracle boy was conceived, and we were absolutely delighted. The first part of the pregnancy was fine, and then the 20-week scan happened. They picked up a major heart defect. Just utter devastation. Our precious baby that was so loved and so wanted potentially might not survive. I'll never forget that moment. And we had the most phenomenal medical team around us, but we had no one to turn to in terms of emotional support. And that's when we were introduced to Tiny Tickers. They scooped us up from being a crumpled mess and gave us a chance to express how we were feeling. They were that hope and support.
And you could help the Tiny Tickers right now. To donate £40, £30 or £20, just text LBC 40 or LBC 30 or LBC 20 without a space to 70766. LBC 40, LBC 30 or LBC 20 to 70766. 100% of the donation goes to Global Make Some Noise. 16 and over only. Seek the bill payer's permission. Standard network charges apply. See the terms and conditions or make a donation of whatever sum you please at makesomenoise.com. It's 12:46.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10 to 1 is the time. Back to... it's a good one, this. I mean, I think you'd struggle probably to tell a parent that they're wrong. Hang on, let me get this right. I think you'd struggle... Well, I think the sense of not putting any pictures of your children or hardly any pictures of your children on social media is crystal clear. In 2023, let me be clear, in 2016, I would not have agreed. I'd have said, oh, don't be ridiculous. I'm not going to live my life according... But so fascinating. Page turner. Chris is in Richmond. Chris, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
I'm just giving you a call because I am concerned about this story because my little boy is 6 years old. I've never, since he's been born, posted anything online. It was a conscious decision that I made that I didn't feel it was appropriate to do this. And even now, as he's got older, he's very much, I don't like photos being taken. I always ask beforehand. But it's a really interesting point because I'm not with his dad.
Okay.
And actually, his dad is very much, he wants to post things online to be able to show the family the progression that he's made and so forth. Whereas I'm very much...
And does he see less of the boy than you do?
He does, because he was working away and not so much now.
Okay.
But at the time, it was a bone of contention that he was very much, well, I've only set my preferences to friends and family and so forth, so it won't go far. But actually, in my mind, simply putting information out there on various sites, actually you're opening yourself up to undesirable people looking at something that actually you wouldn't want them to do. If we go to a park and we see somebody that's looking at children inappropriately, we would naturally kind of think, oh, something's not right here. And we are doing it freely by putting our pictures online, whether that be in a manner that they're at a birthday party, whatever it may be.
But I do understand. I mean, and I have just said it makes perfect sense to me. But you're not going to keep the children at home forever because of potential inappropriate. I don't know what inappropriate looking looks like, but everyone knows what you're referring to. So you can't. Do you see what I mean? It's impossible to keep children secret.
It is. But I am of the mindset that, yes, we walk around every day and so forth, but actually putting something out there that effectively has the ability to be used in a manner that you did not agree to, your child did not agree to. And ultimately, with my little boy, I ask him if he would like to do something. It's very much a conversation. And
how fractious do things get with his dad on this specific issue? Because I see his point as well, wants to show his parents in the easiest way available. It's easier than texting and tweeting. And
indeed. And I completely understand that. And in fairness, we don't talk about it anymore. And I don't look at his Facebook page because
so you've kind of just surrendered in a way.
It's almost become a situation whereas I can't, it causes unnecessary tension between us.
I feel for you.
So it's become a situation where we simply just don't discuss those sort of things. And if there is a situation that we talk about that does become a little bit fractious, it does put a negative tint on our relationship, which otherwise is very good.
Good. So that's it's a bone of contention that you've elected to bury, if you pardon it.
And it's a real shame because I have very strong views on social media. I'm not on there myself. I don't necessarily believe it's appropriate. And I grew up in the ages that I'm 39. We didn't have it, so when we were children, we never kind of missed it. And there was kind of photos, actual real tangible photos that we could show and hold. Whereas now it just seems like we're putting our nearest and dearest out there for the world to comment, both positively and negatively. I think
you've made your case quite brilliantly, and I think 10 years ago I'd have called you paranoid, but I wouldn't dream of doing that today. The world turns, doesn't it, Chris? And if we don't change with it as the world changes, then we're doomed. We'll all turn into 30p Lee Anderson, and we'll be offering up opinions that bear no resemblance whatsoever to the world that we actually inhabit. And I completely understand why you do what you do, and the simplest way to sort it would simply just to say better safe than sorry. What do you lose by not putting pictures of your children on Facebook? What risk are you taking? What loss are you enduring? I think. Well, I wish you well. I can't. I've got to crack on because I've got to play a little clip of full disclosure, or quite a big clip actually. But I find that absolutely fascinating, not least because it's very easy. I think I'm fairly confident that 10 years ago I would, maybe not even that politely, I would have said there was some paranoia in play there, but I certainly wouldn't say that now for the very simple reason that I don't think it. Paranoia is a great word. And talking of words, yeah? My guest on this week's Full Disclosure is Susie Dent. And I know, like me, that you have a particular fondness for digging into words. You can always tell on Mystery Hour, can't you? You get one question about the origin of a phrase and suddenly the whole switchboard fills up with them, so we have to have a moratorium. Anyway, enough of it. Here is Susie Dent, star of Countdown, 8 out of 10 cats do countdown, and of course her Orange, Nothing Rhymes with Orange podcast, and author of brilliant books, which we talk about a lot in the podcast. Here's a little bit of me and her.
People, certainly when I dredge up a word from the historical dictionary that seems so appropriate for today, I think people marvel at the fact that it existed in another time. There obviously was a need for it then, but also intrigued, as I am, as to why it kind of languished for so long and then,
Today's word
faded.
is quite a good example of that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, I did that sitting on this chair, actually, before you came. Yeah. Ruthful. I just love it, yeah, because I always bang on about this, but there are so many lost positives in the dictionary, and we focus entirely on the negative. So ruthful is to be full of compassion. The name Ruth means compassionate. And ruthful was around in the 13th century. And to be fair, ruthless was only a century later, but 100 years. Yeah. And ruthful died a death, really.
How do you study that then? How do you explore the reasons why it died a death? Because it's a lovely word, and it should. I mean, all three. Ruth itself should be in more. You could describe a politician as being markedly lacking in Ruth, couldn't you?
Well, possibly. That was what prompted this. But yes, you could. And actually, what's also really interesting about human nature is that the only way that ruthful has survived is in rueful. Because rue is a kind of riff on Ruth. Right. So even rueful, to be ruthful is to be sort of slightly kind of regretful, isn't it? And remorseful almost. So it's lost its positivity again. And I love the fact that, for example, soon in Old English meant now, immediately. Yes. But because of the way that we are, it kind of meant, well, at some point. Yes, we'll do it. It's a bit like in Devon they have directly. I'll do it directly, which is not directly at all. It's like mañana. I'll do it at some point, which I like. And so you get a sense of human nature, I think, by the way that these words develop, obviously.
So it's a fascination with humans, actually, and why they do the things they do, and words being, obviously the key mode of communication. Yeah. How does the academic side of it work, though? When you come, can you tell? Do you work out why ruthful fell out of use, or is it just attrition, really?
Well, I think there's all sorts of things going on. So, for example, if you were to say to me, why is Shakespeare the most quoted author in the OED? You'd have to look back at the way dictionaries were compiled. You'd have to look back at the sort of literary canon that was studied for proper quotations. Yeah. Samuel Johnson only wanted to look at the classics. He didn't want any of the kind of vulgar language on the street. He changed his mind. But and the OED found so many brilliant records of words from Shakespeare that they put those in at the expense, I'm sure, quite often of people who were using those words before. Yeah. So it's partly the way that dictionaries have been compiled, I think, and what dictionary compilers were looking for, but also that it must say something about our dwelling on the sort of, slightly bad and sad side of lives. Because I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that when we sit around and gossip, we are probably quite negative and take the mickey out of people, because dialect also collects around certain themes, and they tend to be earthy themes. So, being bow-legged or bandy-legged, there's loads of words in the dialect dictionary for that. So many more words for being cold, starving, ugly, blisters and armpits, all of those stuff get a lot of mentions, whereas the sort of more poetic and literary side of things, they just don't really get a look at.
Because you don't close the door with a friend and a confidant and then start saying nice things about people who aren't there very often.
Exactly,
do you?
And that's very sad. And you can see that on all the reality TV shows, can't you? You can just see it on all the social media stuff that comes out. So I think that's probably why. But it always kills me that there are words in the dictionary that are so utterly exquisite, and yet there's only one record of it.
That's incredible.
But there is also, of course, solace in the fact that it is there in the first place, and that it won't ever go, because when it comes to the Oxford English Dictionary, if a word's in, it will never come out.
It is. It's just gone 1 o'clock. That's a little longer than I realised. Apologies to Sheila, really, not to anyone else. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, Rewind Live Radio, or enjoy the whole show podcast. All our shows are there to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcast, including Full Disclosure, which, as you heard this week, is with Susie Dent, etymologist and TV legend. Rewind Live Radio on Global Player. Download for free from your app store, or head to globalplayer.com. Thank you for donating to Make Some Noise today. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4. Now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
Thank you very much, James.
James O'Brien on LBC.